look. She asked if he could take her as a student. He was surprised by such a request and asked by whom. Joel pointed her finger at herself and said that she wants it too. She will be better than her sister. Her sister clenched her hand into a fist with displeasure and said that she was the first to ask. They started arguing and Joel exclaimed that she was clearly stronger than her. Her sister grinned and said that she had 2 more pearls. Joel replied that she stole the monsters she was hunting. Gangram watched their quarrel with a smile and thought it was a farce. He told the girls that he would not teach anyone, so they should not quarrel. Sua laughed, and at that moment a thought suddenly appeared in Gangram's head. Why did he follow them? These words immediately dispelled all his joy, and he was afraid. He quickly rose from his seat and Sua looked at him in surprise. He took his sword and walked towards the forest, and the twins asked where he was going. He replied that it was too noisy here. He'll sleep somewhere else, so don't let them wait for him. He moved away from the camp, and the girls looked after him worriedly. Meanwhile, he began to reproach himself and think, what the hell was he doing? He needed to stay away from them. Time passed and Gangram began to mind his own business. He took out a fierce egg and opened its mouth. Thinking that he had something to do, the egg started chattering its teeth asking for food, and he said it must be hungry. He brought a branch with leaves to his mouth and said to eat. The egg took a bite from the leaf and immediately spat it out. The system reported that the unknown egg was rejecting food. An unknown egg requests meat. It goes on a hunger strike. But Gangram insisted on his own and began to force feed the egg leaves, telling it to eat more. The system reported a growth rate of 0.4%. Soon he returned back to the camp, but did not catch the girl's eyes and hid in a tree. The gods asked why he returned. The other god replied that he was probably worried about his friends. God said that he even knows the name for it, Sundir. Another god asked, what is this? The deity asked, he didn't have that, right? Spring potatoes are wonderful and Sundir children will share them. Gangram heard everything at this time and he blushed a little, thinking that he would pump up and cut off all communication. One of the gods agreed with the words of another deity and said that it was definitely Gangram. The deity said that he could just be with them, but he is again acting on the push-pull principle. Another god joined the conversation and said that this is the meaning of life for Gangram. The deity replied that this irritated him a little. Meanwhile, the twins in the camp started arguing again. Baum looked at her sister displeasedly and exclaimed, why is she so absent-minded? She needs to be more careful. Joel annoyedly told her to stop nagging her. She is simply reflecting on the past. Sua did not interfere and watched them with a smile. One of the gods asked the others to be quiet. He does not hear what the members of the Gangram team are talking about. Gangram also began to watch them with a smile and Baum told her sister to think less and act more. He remembered the old days and thought that it reminded him of the Flying Tiger sect. He and Harang argued in the same way. Tihun laughed at them, and Sua was touched, sitting at a distance. But in the end they were always separated by Doyan. This was their way of life. He will have a lot of things to do, but the sect, one way or another, will enter their lives. He leaned his back against the tree trunk and looked at the sky, thinking with a smile that this was a pleasant sorrow. His soul is already warm. Suddenly he smelled a strange smell and became nervous, thinking, what is this sweet smell? But not only Gangram felt this. The huge bears that were wandering around the portal nearby immediately ran towards this smell. This sweetish smell lured them straight to the camp. Gangram immediately came down from the tree and Sua became scared due to his unexpected appearance. She tilted her head to the side and asked in surprise, is it him? He didn't answer and started cutting down bushes nearby, and she asked if he was looking for something. When he found what he was looking for, he reached down with his hand and asked Sua, did anyone leave the area while he was gone? She replied that it was not so. He took a peach from the ground that exuded this sweet aroma, and then he picked it up and asked if anyone had come. In his hand was a tertiary rank demonic insect fate peach. This is a peach loved by demons, which attracts them with its ambiguous smell. I saw a path of peaches that led into the forest and thought that there were no fruit trees nearby. Someone left them here on purpose. Perhaps it was the killer. He put the peach in his bag and thought maybe it was that idiot with the invisibility technique. Baum got nervous and hugged Sua, saying that Gajun stopped by recently. He turned around and asked, "Is that really him? Not someone from another zone?" She confirmed his words and said that he was here about an hour ago. Joel approached them and asked, "What is it? Did he do something?" He just looked at them somehow ominously. Gangram remembered how Gajun wondered if he was a villain and thought, "Is Gajun a murderer? Who knows what's in this crazy guy's head?" He turned to the forest and said that there are a lot of fruits here that attract demons here. Sua became wary and asked if he was saying that someone was targeting them. Baum asked, "But who needs it?" Her sister started looking around the bushes next to Gangram, and he asked, "Who knows?" The only thing he is sure of is that they need to avoid other people. He sheathed the sword and said that he would deal with everything. At that moment, a masked killer was hiding behind a tree. Feeling the presence of a stranger, Gangram immediately turned in his direction and ran into the forest. Not finding anyone, he stopped and looked around, thinking that someone had just been here, but he suddenly disappeared. Meanwhile, the demonic bears that had previously run towards them at the smell of peaches stopped and began to look around in puzzlement. Time has passed, a new day has come. Gajun swung his sword, killing the monster, and his clothes were stained with blood. He looked wearily at the corpse, from which blood was still splashing, and thought that this was so painful. Having finished killing the ghosts, he walked further through the forest and thought that the plot was garbage. No allies, no rivals, no enemies, no gods or heroes that would be of interest to him. Only hunting low-level monsters. He stopped and, looking at the sky, wondered what his role was. He remembered how he recently met two twins who asked each other how Gangram became so strong. She didn't think he could defeat the Yeti. Then Gajun was very surprised to hear his name. He defeated a monster he had never even met. But he is the man who first cleared the Hall of Ice. How could Gangram lose to Gunam in the Fire Hall? While he was thinking about this, a thought occurred to him. What if Gangram brought Gunam closer to him on purpose? What if he came from the future and knows all the tactics, rewards, and just wants to get rid of him in order to take everything for himself? His eyes took on a crazy look just thinking about it, and he thought that then everything would fit together. He ran further through the forest with a wide smile, thinking that he needed to find him. At this time, Gangram slowly walked along the path and looked at the map. The system reported that the location was 35% explored. He continued to walk, carefully examining where everything was, and one of the gods asked when he would go hunting. He only has 200 pearls. Another deity asked displeasedly why he was staring at this map. It's more his thing. It's better to let him accept his obsession. Gangram replied that they would rather say who scattered the peaches here. One of the gods cleared his throat and replied that they had not seen anyone here at all. Gangram minimized the map and thought that he very much doubted it. He walked up to the trees and began to hit the trunk with his fists, and the deity asked what he was looking for. The same thing. Another god asked what the same thing was. He replied that it was a secret. After checking the trees, Gangram moved on, and the system reported that he had focused on a long search. His perception had been increased to level 25. His senses became heightened. He immediately smelled a metallic smell and froze in place, thinking, "Is this human blood?" He looked in the direction where the smell came from and activated his ability to steal fate. The search for the dead began. Following the smell, he came across a man covered in blood, lying on the ground and not moving. His gaze became fierce. He realized who it was and immediately created fire, throwing it onto his sword. He walked up to the lying man and swung his sword, but he quickly got up and parried the blow. It was a masked killer. The system reported that no dead people were found nearby. The killer waved his sword and said that if someone needs help, then he needs to check and not expose the blade. Gangram stepped back to avoid his blow and, calling him a murderer, told him to shut up. Before that, he still managed to wound him in the head, and the crack in his mask caught fire. The killer touched his mask and said that he quickly understood. How did he know that it was he who killed them? He took off his mask and looked at him with a smile, saying that he understands that he cannot leave witnesses. Under the mask of the killer, Yujun turned out to be Yujun, whom Gangram met earlier. Now the name of his deity was visible in his window, the horror of all living and dead. Yujun pounced on him and asked if he understood this. Gangram blocked his blow and saw his ability murderous tendencies. It has a primary rank demonic fate class. This ability allows him to absorb the characteristics and abilities of people he kills. It also accumulates karma when used. He gritted his teeth and cursed in his mind, thinking that his stats had doubled since their last meeting. Yujun attacked again, and Gangram parried the blow and exclaimed, "How many did he kill during this time?" Yujun was happy and asked, "Does he mean that he killed a lot of people?" Looking at his face, Gangram frowned and said that he really liked it. "Isn't hunting demons enough for him?" Yujun replied that it was fun too, so he tried to be quieter. But Lord Nakul gave him the strength to kill. He can only use the ability when killing. It would be remiss not to take advantage of this. Gangram lowered his hand and squeezed his sword tighter in anger, asking, "Just because of this?" Yujun asked why he was angry. If he had an ability that only activated when he killed others, what would he do? After these words, his body began to dissolve into thin air. Gangram pointed his sword at him, and soon he completely disappeared and the forest became quiet. Footsteps were heard nearby, and he turned his gaze towards the sound, saying that he spoke as if everyone was thinking along the same lines. But this is complete nonsense. His ability to heighten his senses was activated, and he thought that stealth allowed him to become invisible. He closed his eyes, listening to every sound, and with the thought that if he didn't see it, it didn't mean that it had disappeared. With such a thirst for blood, Yujun appeared behind him and had already swung his sword, but Gangram quickly turned around and blocked the blow, asking, "Does he think he doesn't see him?" Yujun asked with a grin how did he guess. "It's not bad." He disappeared again, and a second later appeared behind him and attacked him, exclaiming that killing him would be fun. He struck and asked how much stronger he would be when he was done with him. Gangram blocked the attack, gritting his teeth, and in his thoughts told him not to even dream about it. He continued to hold back the onslaught of his sword, but it was becoming increasingly difficult for him, and he felt that he needed to use the ability that he had stolen from the Yeti. The Fighting Instincts ability of the tertiary rank Phantom Fate class will fill him with the thirst for battle. If the opponent is stronger, their characteristics will be equal. The stronger the enemy, the more characteristics he will receive. The ability activated, Gangram's lips broke into a crazy smile, and his eyes turned a bright color. The system reported that the opponent was stronger, and was filled with a thirst for battle. Noticing a sharp change in his opponent's behavior, Yujun became wary. He looked at the ominous aura emanating from him and immediately stepped back, asking what the hell. Gangram's sword lit up, and he told him with a big smile that he was quite strong. He attacked Yujun, and he exclaimed excitedly, why the hell did his aura change so suddenly? But Gangram seemed not to hear these words. He attacked him and thought that killing was so pleasant. When he struck again, Yujun blocked it, but had difficulty containing its power. A fiery clot appeared in Gangram's hand, and then swung and grabbed Yujun by the face, thinking that killing someone stronger than him was so pleasant. Because of his grip, Yujun fell backwards to the ground, but not before he managed to wound him in the chest. Gangram did not pay attention to the pain. His blood from the wound splashed onto Yujun's face, who, clutching his burnt face, exclaimed, "How is this possible? Why doesn't he dodge?" Gangram didn't care about the pain. He was obsessed with his imminent death, and with a smile pointed the tip of his sword at his neck to bring this moment closer. Suddenly, Gajun jumped out of the bushes nearby, waved his arms and called out to Gangram, saying that he had come to help. Gangram stopped when he heard the voice, and then turned around in surprise, sensing something. He saw the blue aura that came from Gajun. He immediately lost interest in Yujun and looked at Gajun with a wide smile, thinking that there was someone even stronger here. He dropped Yujun and quickly walked towards him, holding out his hand to him. Gajun placed his hand on the hilt of the second sword and exclaimed, "Is this some kind of competition between teams?" He pulled out his second sword and blocked Gangram's blow, asking with a smile, what should he do? He freed one hand from the sword and said that he had completely lost his head. After that, with a serious face, he punched Gangram in the face and said that he would bring him to his senses. From this blow, Gangram released the sword from his hands and then fell to the ground. Yujun meanwhile began to rise. Gajun looked at him with eyes sparkling with delight and asked, "Is that right?" Yujun ignored him and quickly ran into the forest, and Gajun said that the main villain was escaping. This is probably how the plot should be. Let him come back when he is stronger. Gangram, who was still lying on the ground, reached into his bag and took out a pill, and Gajun kicked him and asked if he was okay. They're allies now, right? Gangram swallowed the pill and the system reported that a healing item was used. All his wounds healed immediately and he, looking displeased at Gajun, told him to find someone else. He shrugged and turned around, walking towards the bushes where the sword was stuck, at the same time saying that he liked it. The rest are just boring supporting characters. They have no characteristics or history. He pulled the sword out of the bushes and then threw it to Gangram and said that he should be the two main characters. Let him agree. Gangram caught the sword and remained silent, looking at it intently. Yujun, meanwhile, ran through the forest and did not breathe in order to remain invisible. He became very nervous and thought that he needed to get rid of the witnesses, but there were two of them, and both were very strong. What should he do? He stopped when he saw the guys nearby who were looking for him. He began to breathe again and smiled as he thought that he just needed to get stronger. He ran out of the forest and showed himself to their eyes, shouting that he was there. The girl was delighted and said that thank God he was here. She was so worried about him. Another man from the group said that he found a body in the forest. Someone had clearly worked on it. Yujun ran up to them with a worried look and said that they had finally been found. He saw the killer in the forest. Suddenly he crouched down in front of them, feigning pain, and quietly placed his hand on the hilt of the sword. The guys from his group got very worried and the girl asked, "Is he wounded? She needs to examine him." The guy used his abilities and said that he could heal him. Yujun looked up at them with a weary look and thanked them with a smile, then quickly pulled out his sword and began to kill them. The corpse of the last member of the group fell to the ground and several different system windows appeared in front of Yujun, indicating that the ability to have a tendency to kill was activated. It absorbed 10% of opponent's stats. His karma increases. Horror for the living and the dead is satisfied by his actions. Yujun looked up at the sky in surprise, and when a necklace appeared on his neck, the system reported that the horror for the living and the dead had gifted him with a blade necklace. This necklace increased his strength by 10%. Yujun was happy looking at the notification and said that this is power. He smiled broadly and, thanking Nakul, said that Gangram was now in trouble. Suddenly one drop of water fell on his face. Then heavy rain began to pour and the forest became dark. The system reported that the energy of water was condensing around him. Yujun was upset because it started to rain and the system reported that the energy of the water was interfering with his destiny. His characteristics were reduced by 10%. Horror for the living and the dead says there is nothing to worry about. Gangram has a fire attribute, which has also become weaker. Upon hearing this, Yujun smiled and said that it was nice. Lightning thundered in the sky and he said that he needed to find him before the rain got worse. Gangram at this time cut down all the trees in the area with a sword. Having cut down one, he began to work on another, and Yujun appeared behind him, hiding under invisibility. Gangram sighed wearily and said that there was only one thing left. He swung his sword to start cutting down the tree, but at the same moment Yujun attacked him from behind. Gangram quickly detected his presence and turned around, blocking his blow, causing sparks to appear. Yujun was surprised by this and asked what the hell. He struck again, which Gangram blocked, and began to push him back. He laughed and asked, "What now?" After his blow, a chip appeared on Gangram's sword and he looked at it with a gloomy face. Yujun jumped and attacked him again, shouting that he was a weakling, and Gangram looked up at him nervously. Yujun struck, but Gangram quickly blocked his attack and a loud clang was heard from the clash of swords. After that, they both jumped back and Yujun exclaimed that he would have killed fewer people if he had known that he was so weak. Gangram remained silent and Yujun attacked him again, asking why this was so. Where is his friend? He walks here alone, as if he really wants to die. Gangram blocked each of his blows, but at one moment he grinned. Yujun pressed his sword harder and frowned, asking why he was smiling. Unexpectedly for him, streams of water appeared around Gangram's hands. Two elements were raging behind him at once. With the help of water, he pressed harder on the enemy's sword, causing him to be surprised and stagger. The system reported that the Gangram attribute was changed to water. He looked at his opponent with a relaxed smile as he continued to push him back. His characteristics began to recover. The force pressing on Yujun became greater and his hands began to tremble, having difficulty holding the sword. Gangram knocked his sword away and began to attack, not giving him a chance to retaliate and forcing him to retreat. The system at this time reported that the water energy in the surrounding area was increasing. Gangram's stats are increased by 10% due to the water attribute bonus. The water's energy overrides Naam Yujun's fate, reducing his stats by 20%. After blocking the attack, Yujun thought, what the hell? He thought his stats would also decrease. He looked into the sky and shouted displeasedly that he had said that he also had the attribute of fire. The deity remained silent and suddenly lightning struck the felled tree behind Gangram with a roar, and he asked, "Is this Nakel's doing?" Yujun became very nervous while holding Gangram's sword, and the system informed him that the horror of the living and the dead advised him not to give in to attempts to intimidate. He says that even with reduced stats he is stronger than Gangram. Yujun smiled and asked, "Is this true?" Gangram noticed the change in his mood and became wary, and then Yujun sharply swung his sword and said that he did not know how he managed to change the attribute. The words of the deity gave him confidence and he struck from above, and Gangram wanted to block it, but his sword treacherously broke into several fragments. He was greatly surprised by this, and then his enemy kicked him in the stomach and exclaimed that he was still stronger than him. Yujun's powerful blow threw him back, and his back hit the trunk of a burning tree, which had previously been struck by lightning. While he was trying to recover from such a blow, Yujun, without wasting a second, ran towards him. He grabbed him by the neck and pressed him to a tree, pointing a sharp sword at his face, and said that it was fun. Gangram grabbed the stick above his head, but Yujun didn't notice and told him not to worry, he won't be alone. With a wide smile on his face, he shouted that he would finish off his friends too. Immediately after these words, Gangram pulled out a stick from the tree trunk and pierced it through his stomach. This stick turned out to be a wooden-toothed sword, which soon caused Yujun to bleed profusely. Losing his balance, he unclenched his fingers on Gangram's neck, and he asked with a furious look, "What did he say?" Yujun started to fall and asked how did this happen. Branch. The toothy wooden sword in his stomach sparkled. Then lightning struck the tree again. Gangram abruptly pulled out his sword and replied that it was not just a branch. Yujun looked at him in horror and covered the wound with his hand, asking Nakel to help him. Gangram pointed his sword at him and said that it was too late. The system informed Yujun that the horror for the living and the dead had temporarily interrupted communication. Lightning struck in the sky, and at the same time Gangram struck the final blow. He approached his corpse and said that there was something else. He extended his hand to him and said that he also has an ability that awakens after murders. The system reported that the ability to steal fate was activated. After some time, Gangram cut off the mantis's claw and, out of breath after killing the monster, thought that the benefits of this kingdom turned out to be more than he expected. First, he received the 7-branch lightning sword. This sword was not finished yet. It had a tertiary rank dragon destiny. It is the sword of a sacred tree struck by lightning. For the sake of this sword, he searched everything. He cut down all the trees in the zone and also installed lightning rods in the cut trunks. He started killing mantises again and thought that secondly, he took Yujun's equipment and his stealth ability. Somehow he also raised the class of his destiny. He plunged his sword into the monster's body and suddenly froze in place. Besides all this, something tormented him. He suddenly grabbed his head as he heard a voice in his head. The voice addressed him by name and said that he had killed them. Gangram clenched his teeth and tried to cover his ears so as not to hear it, but he failed. Suddenly Gajun came out of the bushes and called out to him, distracting him from bad thoughts. Gangram immediately turned around and Gajun, holding the head of the mantis, asked why he was killing these fools again. "What's wrong with us, Yujun?" Gangram asked if he wasn't supposed to be guarding the door to the 4th area. What did he forget here? Some time ago, right after Yujun escaped, Gangram pointed his sword at Gajun, displeasedly saying that he had missed the killer because of him. Is he on his side? He moved his sword away from his neck and asked with a smile if he could bring it to him himself. This is such a misunderstanding. What should he do to gain his trust? He thinks becoming allies so quickly is too boring. Gangram took a closer look at him and thought that he believed that he would become like this after Gunam's death. He can probably take it as a backup. He sheathed his sword and said that from now on he had to do as he said. Gajun was happy and said that was great. And what should he do? Gangram unfolded his map and told him to do the same. He opened the map and asked how he knew he had it. Exactly, he's a regressor, right? Gangram replied that the gods who watch over him like to talk. They shared data with each other's maps and the system reported that the level of investigation had been increased. Gangram pointed to a certain place on the map and said that this is the exit of another zone. Let him stand there so that he cannot escape. Currently, Gajun began to watch as Gangram carved up the corpse of the mantis and said that he had not heard anything from him for several days. So he came to check for himself how he was coping. Gangram took the pearl from the corpse and said that he couldn't find it, so he concentrated on his task. It looks like he escaped. Gajun crouched down next to him and, placing his hand on his shoulder, said with a smile that, to be honest, he was sure that he had finished him off. He picked up his necklace with his finger and said that it seemed like these were his things, and he also changed his weapon. Gangram waved his hand away and replied that God gave him this necklace, and he bought the weapon in the store because the previous one had become unusable. Gajun asked, "Is it really true?" He replied that he should not involve him in his imaginary world. After that he stood up and said that he did not know what had happened to him. Gajun did not believe it and replied that it would be as he said. He looked at his indifferent face from bottom to top, and then raised his hand to his chest and said that if he did kill him, then he could tell him he was on his side. Gangram peered into his face, sparkling with friendliness, and silence hung between them. Then he turned away from him and replied that nothing had happened. Stop pretending they're friends. Gajun smiled and said that he was so cold. He leaned his hands on his knees and stood up, saying that then it was time for him to collect pearls. He went into the forest and, waving goodbye, said that Sua was the first to finish the room. Gangram became interested and followed him with his gaze, and then picked up the last pearl and said that it was nice. The system reported that he had finished collecting and cleared the forest of swords from the room. Time passed. He had already managed to return back to the training center, and joyful cries from the twins were heard, asking him to take them as assistants. Gangram calmly sipped his coffee and replied that he did not agree. Bomb said that she will try. She will do whatever he says. She even bought him coffee. Her sister clenched her fists and asked, "Is it because they are weak?" But they have the blessing of the gods. Gangram became interested and, using the abilities of the Weapon of Fate, asked the gods. One of the girls said that she was blessed by the Maiden of the Hunt and the Moon, and her sister said that she was blessed by a bowstring soaked in sunlight. Gangram immediately realized that it was Apollo and Artemis. He smiled and said that they fit their characteristics perfectly, the names for sure. Baum leaned forward impatiently and asked, "So what?" Gangram pointed his finger up and said that it would be better if they asked their gods and not him. Baum got upset and asked why. Joel asked, "Then by what god is he blessed?" He replied that there was nothing. They asked why. He sighed with a smile and replied that he was not offered. Joel asked happily, "Is this true? What about the Father of gods and humanity?" Baum looked at him worriedly, and a system window opened in front of her sister, from which she began to read that there is a synergy effect between people blessed by the same pantheon of gods. Baum noticed something in Gangram's expression and, without letting Joel finish, immediately covered her mouth with her hand. Joel lowered her hand and asked displeasedly what she was doing. Baum told Gangram with a smile that Sua isn't particularly interested in gods either. He waved his hand and replied that he didn't need that yet, and he didn't really want to be a mentor either. Baum looked at Gangram with concern and a little surprise and thought, did she hear correctly now? She remembered his nervous expression when Joel started talking about the gods, and thought, there must be a reason why they want a blessing. He sighed and told them that he had already said that he was not ready to teach anyone, so he fell silent when suddenly a crash was heard from the direction of the gate. He and the girls turned their gaze towards the sound and saw an exhausted man fall out of the gate. Gangram began to rise from his seat to help him, and one of the girls asked in surprise what was there. "Is this the first room?" They looked closer and saw that at the entrance to the first room there was a man in the clothes of a priest named Johann Richter. They helped him sit on the stage, and Gangram, calling him father, asked if he was okay. He caught his breath and replied that everything was fine. He was grateful to them. Gangram asked if he still finds it difficult to kill monsters. Johann wearily straightened his hair and confirmed his words. He felt sad and lowered his gaze, saying that he was still scared to meet them. Gangram smiled and thought it was timely. Johann said that he had awakened, but he could not even kill monsters. He's so pathetic. Gangram extended his hand to him and with a wide smile asked if he could help him with the raid. One of the twins looked at him in surprise, and Johann, looking up at him in surprise, asked, "Is this true?" The twins were delighted, calling Gangram a master, and said that they would help too. He replied that they had better go hunting. He will think about their continuation. The girls ran away joyfully, and Gangram, looking after them, repeated in his thoughts what he would think. Johann asked, "Is he sure?" "He will only be ballast." Gangram thought about it, and remembering how Gajun helped him, he thought that he would do what Gajun did in his previous life. He used his detect fate ability with a smirk and replied that they should help each other. Johann burst into tears of joy and folded his hands in prayer, calling him a child, and at that time he saw his ability. He has a tertiary rank Dragon Fate class, as well as an Earth attribute. Divine name, Holy Protector of Doctors and Travelers. He asked, then they won't waste time. He also saw the Holy Father's ability called the Healing Hand. This ability's class is primary rank Ghost Fate. It cures paralysis, bleeding, and poison. The higher the class of the spell, the less mana it needs to use. The leader of the second team and 2 inspectors, meanwhile, gathered in the break room and began to drink coffee. One of them turned to the leader and said that he was in a good mood today. He answered with a smile that it was because the first person to finish the room was from their zone. Sungti added that it is much faster than in the first zone. Gongju brought the coffee cup to his face and agreed, saying it was great. There was a slam of the door, and he squeezed his glass in rage when he saw who had entered. The woman noticed him and said that the princess leader was also here. Xiaomunyangliu was standing in the aisle, and he asked what brought her here. She waved her hand and said with a smile that she heard the news, so she came to congratulate them. The first successful raid was carried out by students of the second zone. This is an excellent job. Next time the first and second zones will meet. Gongju unhappily agreed with her words. She approached him and with a confident smile asked if they could arrange a bet. He became interested and she said that they could make a bet on who would be the first to finish the next hall on the highest difficulty. Between his students and hers, his face became serious, and she asked with a satisfied grin, who would win? He smiled and asked, "What are the bets?" She thought for a moment and replied that the loser must fulfill the winner's wish. He repeated the conditions, puzzled, and she turned her gaze to him, asking mockingly, was he scared? He got angry and showed her his fist, exclaiming, "Is she crazy? Why should he be afraid? It is obvious that his students will win." She asked, "So what? Are they arguing?" He agreed, and after that she went to the exit and finally said that this was great. She was looking forward to it. They will see each other soon. She left, closing the door behind her, and silence reigned in the restroom. After a short pause, Gongju asked with a creepy smile, "Did they hear? They must win." Anavi and Sungti flinched, and he said with a serious face that they would have to take special precautions. After some time, Gangram poured all the collected pearls into Johan's bag, and he fulfilled the conditions for clearing. He looked puzzled at the system window, which informed him that he had successfully enrolled the Forest of Swords. He looked up at Gangram and said that he couldn't even believe it. Only 2 days had passed. But he did a great job. Gangram remembered how Johan treated him after being injured in the ice hall and said that he helped him a lot with his treatment. Johan lowered his head in frustration and said that it was nothing. He's so useless. Gangram replied that this was enough. He sat down opposite him and said encouragingly that everyone has their own role in life. Others have not yet realized its value. The Holy Father burst into tears again, and Gangram with a smile invited him to prepare for the next room. They walked out of the gate together and he asked, "Did he receive a message from Inspector Anavi?" Johan read the message from the inspector and confirmed Gangram's words, and he said that they won't finish here so quickly, so let him prepare. The message from the inspector said that a 5th room would be opened for them, and they would have to spend more time there than in the previous ones. Let them prepare carefully. Gangram said that the first team entered 5 days ago. They need to move out tomorrow morning. Johan agreed and said that then they would meet at the totems. The next morning they passed through the gate of the 5th room and found themselves on the sandy shore of the sea. Johan opened his mouth wide in surprise and delight, looking at everything around him, and then joyfully exclaimed that it was so beautiful here. He would never have thought that this was the demon realm. The system reported that they had entered the room of said sins. There are special conditions here. First, the reward for the first person to clear it depends on the difficulty level. Second, the use of the store is prohibited. Third, until the raid is over, they cannot leave. They both read the conditions, and Gangram thought that the third condition was a pain in the ass. It was also written about the clearing condition. They need to find an unknown object in order to return to the lobby. Johan said that the clearing conditions were not written. Gangram agreed and said that they would have to take everything. Johan said there are so many mysteries here. Is that why the room is called that? Find and discover secrets. Gangram replied that it was not in this regard. He turned to him and stuck out his tongue, saying that this meant tearing out the tongue. They soon found a suitable place in the forest and set up camp there. Gangram fixed the tent on the ground, prepared a fire, and Johan looked around with delight at their ready-made camp. He brought brushwood and said with a smile that he was strained by the additional conditions, but with such preparation they would not even need to return. Gangram shaded his eyes from the sun and looked into the distance, saying that it was good that they had stocked up before coming here. He went ahead and said that he would go and look around, but for now let him wait here. He threw a purple ball into the fire, and Johan, who threw the brushwood, asked what it was. He told him about the effect of this item, and after that he left with the thought that he was done with the camp. He reached the stream and, looking at the forest, thought that now only food remained. Meanwhile, one of the awakened ones found an orchard. One of them said that it would benefit from man-made, like a garden. They noticed the dogs eating the fallen fruit and said that the animals were guarding here. The awakened one asked, "Is this a problem?" And he replied that they would die of hunger. Or they can visit the Shin Sua camp. Sangwon is dissatisfied with what she told him, even if he doesn't even say her name. He would rather bite off his leg than go to her. He remembered how they went together to check the horoscope. He thought, how can he ask for help from the one who rejected him? Just thinking about it drives him crazy. He told the others that they should just get rid of the local wildlife and take the fruit. They need to start before they are completely exhausted. The man sitting next to him asked, "Are they coming again?" Why did he buy a weapon then? Sangwon asked if he thought he would hire them if he could fight himself. What does he pay them for? After that, the awakened ones ran out of their hiding place and ran into the garden, starting to chop down the dogs running away in panic with swords. One of them killed another dog and exclaimed that they were weaker than they looked. After clearing the garden, Sangwon came out of hiding and asked, "Is everyone dead?" The man replied that it looked like it. Sangwon looked at the trees and told them to take as much as they could before they came. One of the awakened ones climbed a tree for fruit and said that in childhood he had a nickname of a monkey. His friend asked if it was because of his face. While they were trying to collect fruits from the tree, Sangwon looked at his feet and noticed something. He looked closely at the emaciated corpse of the dog and thought, why are they so skinny? He frowned, beginning to realize that something was wrong here, and said that there was so much fruit here. One of the gods said that if he took the fruit without permission, the owner of the garden would tear out his tongue. Sangwon noticed the dogs had collars on their necks and repeated, "Master." Immediately after this, the clatter of monsters' steps was heard from the direction of the forest, and Sangwon turned around nervously. And the god said that this was so uncivilized. Let him run before he loses his tongue. The monsters came out of the shadows of the trees, and now one could see that they were ferocious monkeys. A huge troop of monkeys quickly ran towards them, drooling. Sangwon became very worried and turned to his comrades, loudly shouting for them to run. They immediately climbed down from the tree and ran away from the garden, and the monkeys followed them. While they were running, Sangwon was overtaken by his comrades, and he ended up behind everyone. The monkeys began to catch up with him, and he asked to wait, they must protect him. But they ignored him and ran on, and then one of the monkeys grabbed him, and he shouted that they were useless idiots. Suddenly, the monster froze in place, looking for something in the forest. A second later, Gangram plunged his sword into the monkey's throat, and Sangwon looked in horror at the blade above him. Tears flowed from his eyes, and Gangram said that he sees that his destiny is to help others. He smiled and said that he was lucky, but in future he should be more careful. Sangwon recognized him and remembered how he destroyed his future with Sua by telling his horoscope. He quickly wiped his tears and asked what the hell. No one asked for it. He thinks he will just forget everything because he helped him once. Gangram pulled his sword from the monster's neck and told him to be quiet. He is unlikely to help, even if he begs on his knees. Sangwon called him an idiot and wanted to say something, but at that moment Gangram struck the monster and blood sprayed, causing him to fall silent. He began to chop down the approaching monsters and asked Sangwon, "How long will he stand?" He remained silent, and 3 silhouettes appeared on the path running towards him. His friends ran to him and helped him up, asking if he was okay. One of them apologized and said that he had not noticed that he was behind, but he survived thanks to Gangram. Hearing these words, Sangwon gritted his teeth in anger, and then grinned and clenched his hand into a fist, saying that he would not forgive him. Gangram was still dealing with the monkeys at this time and used his fire attribute, throwing several monkeys away from him with a swing of his sword. 2 monsters approached him from behind, but he noticed this and, having killed the monsters in front, extended his free hand back and burned the monkeys. When no one else began to attack, he sheathed the sword and thought, "Is that all? He should feed the egg while no one is around." He took the egg out of the bag and untied its mouth. and it, seeing the roasted corpses of the monkeys, smiled broadly and began to drool. But Gangram quickly destroyed the egg's dreams by bringing a green fruit to its mouth and telling it to eat. The egg did not resist and took a bite of the fruit, and Gangram sighed heavily and, looking at the corpses, said that he would get them. He soon returned to camp with the meat and began to roast it over the fire with Johann. He asked, "Is this the monster?" Gangram mixed the sticks in the fire and confirmed his words. After that, he took the meat and brought it to his mouth, asking with a smile, "Does he remember that he asked him for help?" Johann confirmed his words and asked, "But how can he help him?" Gangram silently dug his teeth into the fried juicy meat, and a second later he felt very ill and blood sprayed from his mouth. Johann was very frightened and called out to him in concern, reaching out to him with his hands. Gangram wiped the blood from his face and said that all the monsters here have poison in their veins. Johann asked excitedly, "Poison?" When blood sprayed from his ears, Gangram became even worse and asked him to help him. He handed him the mana restoration tea and told him to take it if necessary. Johann looked at him in shock, and he said that he believed in him. The system reported that the healing hand ability was activated. The sun began to set, and Gangram continued to eat the poisoned meat. Under the influence of poison, he waved to someone and said that someone was waving to him from the other side of the stream. Johann again used his ability and exclaimed that under no circumstances should he go there. Gangram took a bite of meat and he exclaimed, "Why is he doing this? Let him become." The system reported several times that the healing hand ability was activated. Gangram came to his senses and said that he had already been released. Johann was delighted and asked, "Is this true?" He confirmed his words and said that the poison was weakening, since he was used to it. Johann did not understand what he meant, and then Gangram again took the poisoned meat and said that now it was edible. The Holy Father screamed loudly in shock and grabbed his head. In this way he treated him until the night, and finally a notification came that he had received the ability to resist poisons. Gangram smiled, feeling better, and happily said that everything was fine now. Johann's whole body trembled, and he asked hopefully, "Is he finished?" Gangram confirmed his words and said that it was an excellent job. But at the same moment Johann fell unconscious to the ground, and he called out to him in concern. After that, he carried him into the tent and put him to bed, saying that he had done a good job. Johann dozed off and through his sleep asked him not to eat any more poison. Gangram left him alone and, looking at his new ability in the fate window, thought that it took longer than he expected. The resistance class is still small. Its poison resistance ability has a tertiary rank insect fate class. This ability provides him with resistance to various poisons. The higher the opponent's poison class, the less the effect of this ability. Gangram remembered what a rich table he had set for the Holy Father, and thought that it was not in vain that he gave him food that was good for mana. Among this food was soup made from a whole duck, which adds 10% to the maximum mana. It also contained ginseng extract, which increases mana recovery by 5%. Among these were colored dumplings, which also gave a bonus to recovery. If this had not happened, the Holy Father would have lost consciousness much earlier. He put his hand on Johann's shoulder and told him to wake up. He looked up dissatisfied at the entrance to the tent and thought that he wanted to let him rest after a hard day, but they wouldn't allow it. With these thoughts, he watched as an unknown person unzipped the tent. Immediately after this, he quickly approached the entrance and lunged forward, wounding the man who was opening the tent. The man screamed loudly and Johann woke up from the noise, so the first thing he asked was what was happening. Gangram looked outside and said that he knew they would come. There was a group of 4 people standing outside the tent, and he said it was an ambush. He turned to the Holy Father with a serious face and said that he would deal with them, and let him stay here. If something happens, let him shout. Johann excitedly adjusted his glasses and agreed, after which Gangram left the tent to the awakened ones who attacked him, who thought that they were sleeping. He did not recognize their faces and thought that he did not remember these guys. Are they from the first zone? The wounded awakened one, who has a primary rank human destiny, said that they will leave here if they give them food. The guy next to him, who had a tertiary rank ghostly fate, agreed with his comrade's words and said that they were thieves, not murderers. Gangram grinned and asked, "Are they saying that they are not killers? They will die without food." He thought that in his past life, the conflict from the first zone ended very badly. He asked, "What if he doesn't agree?" The man squeezed his blade tighter, and then they all rushed to attack, and he shouted that then they would take it by force. The attacker swung his blade, but Gangram ducked and approached him. Immediately after that he straightened up and hit him on the head. Then he hit him face first on his knee. He became wary and thought it was strange. He struck the hilt of his sword at his attacker with the thought that with their class and skills they could easily find food. Are their hands just itching? Having dealt with one, he lit a flame in his hand and aimed at the guy who swung his sword at him. He immediately approached his opponent and knocked his sword aside, and he shouted to his comrades that he was too strong. The awakened cursed and began to run away, saying that they would return and report everything to the captain. Heard this, Gangram became distracted and thought about it, and immediately after that the attackers threw a smoking ball directly into his burning hand. There was a loud bang from the explosion, and the entire area around was immediately filled with smoke. At this time, Johann continued to sit in the tent and pray, nervously clutching the cross in his hands. As soon as he heard an explosion outside, he immediately looked in the direction of the sound. Without hesitation, he went to the exit of the tent and asked Gangram if he was okay. "He's already coming." But suddenly he stopped, remembering how he told him not to stick his head out. His face darkened, and he wondered what he would do even if he got out. Of course, that's why he left it there. He clenched his hand into a fist and pursed his lips, thinking that he was ballast. Some sounds were heard, but he still did not dare to go out and thought, was it really right to hide like that? A second later, Gangram sharply pulled the tent fabric aside and let smoke inside. Johann looked up at Gangram in surprise and concern, examining him. He closed his eyes and cleared his throat from the smoke, saying that they were smoke bombs for escape. The Holy Father asked if he was hurt. He replied that he was fine. He went inside and closed the entrance, and Johann asked why he thought they attacked. He replied that they wanted their food. Johann thought about this, and Gangram said that the collision of zones in the last room ended very badly, or rather with murder. The Holy Father recoiled in horror and exclaimed, "Murder?" Gangram said that the same thing could happen here, so he should be wary of strangers. Johann became even more worried and, sighing heavily, looked away and said that he thought he shouldn't have taken it. Gangram sat down opposite him and asked why. Johann lowered his head and said that he was only bothering him. And what is the point of these trainings if he undergoes them with his help? It seems that Annevi was right when she said that people who don't want to fight don't need their abilities. Gangram frowned and raised one eyebrow, wondering what kind of nonsense he was talking about. He called him father and put his hand on his shoulder. Johann looked up at him and he asked, "Does he remember what he told him?" Others have not yet realized its benefits. Now people are treated with the help of totems, and medicines are also given out everywhere. What happens after training? Johann remained silent, looking at Gangram in surprise, and he said that everything would be serious. When the people realize how expensive the potions are, the people who kicked him out will regret it. Johann waved his hands and stammered that he had left on his own. Then Gangram stood up and said that he fights, and he heals. He smiled and said that he did not like this nonsense with fate, destiny, and the like, but he could confidently say that in the future he would save a lot of people. Does he still want to give up? After listening to him, Johann began to understand his worth and thought, can he help people? He became confident in his abilities and exclaimed that this was not true. He would never give up. His look became confident, and he asked Gangram to help him. He agreed and said that he would also need his help. Tomorrow there will be even more poison. Johann became nervous and asked him to repeat it. 3 days later, Sua's tent was located in a large clearing in the middle of the forest. The twins went inside and took off their camouflage, telling Sua that they were there. She turned to them with a smile and congratulated them on their return. Did they find something? Baum closed her eyes and answered in disappointment that this was not so. She thinks they need to go deeper. Joel crossed her arms over her chest and said that everyone here is so weak, help from them is useless. Baum told her not to say that, they are trying to help. Her sister sighed wearily and said that she thought so too. Let her not deceive herself. Baum remained silent, realizing that she was right, and then said that if they go with the master, it will be faster and easier to learn. But he is probably already somewhere far away. Joel asked displeasedly. Now she understands. She's thinking the same thing. Sua thought about it and said that they should try while Gangram took care of business in the previous rooms. The twins asked when she thought he would return. She answered with a smile that she didn't know. Maybe today. Suddenly voices were heard outside asking, "How did he get here?" After that, some more sounds were heard and the twins, along with Sua, looked expectantly towards the entrance. Gajun opened the entrance to the tent and called out to Sua. She looked at him in surprise, not expecting to see him here, and he asked with a smile, "Have they seen Gangram here?" Sua's face became dissatisfied, and he, seeing her reaction, said that he thinks that this is not so. Joel slammed her palms on the table with displeasure and loudly exclaimed, "How did he pass all the traps?" He replied that he had neutralized them. They should have tried harder. Sua became wary and asked why he came. He waved his hand and replied that he was looking for Gangram. He thoughtfully raised his hand to his face and said that he thought he would be here. The gods said something about this place. Sua crossed her arms and replied that they didn't see him. He asked how they thought he would come if he got rid of a couple of minor characters. Joel got angry and exclaimed, "Is he talking about them or what?" He pointed his finger at them and replied that this is not so. They reveal the main characters. He grinned and said that, however, there are some that are useless. Sua waved her hand towards the girls and asked displeasedly, "Is this how he looks at people?" Suddenly Gajun remembered something and threw a fruit into her hands, telling her to take it. She caught the fruit and the system reported that she received the passion fruit. The room of said sins was completed on low difficulty. She looked up at him with a dissatisfied look and said that she had enough of them. He smiled and said that it turns out they already knew about it. Now he definitely wants to work with them. He needs to find Gangram, and in the story they are his comrades. Suddenly Joel shot an arrow at him, but he dodged. She said dissatisfiedly that she was not eager to be on the same team with him. Sua asked her to calm down and Gajun reached for the hilt of his sword, saying that then he would have to convince them with force. Suddenly green juice splashed onto his hand and he stopped. Sua, who crushed the fruit with her hand and started using her ability, threateningly told him to stop before it's too late. He licked the juice from his hand and asked if she was threatening him. He placed his palm on the hilt of the sword and Sua, noticing this, did the same. Gajun took out 2 swords and a dark blue aura began to play around him, and Sua prepared for the fight. He smiled widely and said that the fight with her would be more interesting, and she frowned, watching him carefully. He spread his arms wide to the side. Joel took aim and was ready to shoot an arrow at him, and Baum waved her hands and asked everyone to calm down. Suddenly a girl ran into the tent and pointed her finger into the forest, telling Sua that it looked like someone was cooking monster meat not far away. Their beginning duel was immediately interrupted and Sua asked, "Monsters?" Gajun was very happy about this news and said that he knew he should have come here. Let her show you where. Meanwhile, not far from their camp, Gangram was cooking food in a pot. A delicious aroma spread through the forest, and he thought that 10 days had already passed since entering the first team. The rest should have already run out of provisions. All that is left edible is the fruit in the garden. Animals and plants are poisonous. He smiled and thought that now he can eat as much as he wants. Students collect approximately 100 pearls a day. The steps of 2 people were heard from the side. Sua wanted to call out to Gangram, but Gajun rushed forward and pushed her back. calling out to Gangram with a smile and waving his hand. Gangram turned around and greeted Sua with a smile, adding unknown seasonings to the soup. She called out to him excitedly and told him not to eat it. She caught her breath after a long run and said that everything here is poisonous. If there is something in the boiler now from here, then... He interrupted her, and while pouring the soup into a bowl, told her not to worry. He removed the poison by simply adding an antidote. He handed her a plate of soup, and she asked in surprise, "Is there an antidote?" Gajun quickly took the plate for himself and thanked Gangram for dinner with a smile, and Sua looked at him displeased. Gangram extended his hand to him, above which a system window with the name of the dish appeared, and said that he wanted 1,000 pearls for service. Gajun smiled awkwardly and said that it was a bit expensive. He still transferred the pearls, and Sua said that she would also take one portion. Gangram told her that he would take 200 pearls from her. She was surprised, and Gajun asked different prices. Gangram replied that he decides everything here, no return. Gajun sighed and replied that he understood. She is still the protagonist, although she also pays. Gangram poured soup into a plate to the brim and gave it to Sua, and Gajun looked at it with a blank face. The rest of the people from the camp came running to the smell. Noticing people approaching them, Gangram loudly said that he would take 200 pearls for a portion of soup. Everyone bought soup for themselves and sat down on the ground, starting to eat. Gangram asked Sua, "Are they looking for better than average quality items?" She smiled and said that she was hoping for his help. He turned to the side and looked at Gajun, asking what he wanted. He scratched the back of his head with a smile and replied that because of the first zone, everything did not go the way he would like. But with him everything will be easier. He turned his gaze to Sua and said that he thought they would deal with him better if they got rid of this extras. She said displeasedly that in such situations they should work together. He asked, has she ever seen the main character have a team of more than 10 people? She exclaimed that they were not some characters from his book. Gangram said with a nervous smile that they should just work together. Couldn't Gajun just find someone at the camp? They both jumped up from their chairs and, pushing each other, simultaneously told Gangram that they wanted to work with him. After that, they returned to the tent and began to discuss further actions. Gangram said that he didn't even think about it, so don't let them try to persuade him. Sua said that they are unlikely to cope with people from the first zone on their own. They have a strange impulse to block their path. They have to fight them whenever they cross paths. Gangram thought about it and asked, "Are you serious?" He thought that he needed to figure out the situation with the first zone. It is unlikely that he will be able to drag the priest along with him. He told Johann that then it would be better for him to stay in the camp. He asked, "Alone? He can't leave him." Gangram interrupted him and said that he had trouble focusing when he was with him. He asked Sua if he could leave him with them. Johann was upset, but she agreed. Gangram told him that he would be safe here and could better reach his potential. Johann bowed his head and agreed, and then wanted to say something. But Gangram interrupted him and shook his head to the sides, saying that he was more comfortable alone. He left the tent, and Sua finally asked him to let them know if anything happened. He nodded and then went on his way. After some time, breaking through the monsters, he went deep into the garden, where fruits of a different kind grew. One of the gods told him that he had become stronger. Another god said that these monsters are too weak. Let him go deeper. The deity asked, "Will they be strong there?" He replied that it was a lot. Gangram ignored them and took a bite of the fruit, thinking it was green fruit. He's already nearby. At that moment his heightened senses activated, and he froze in place when he sensed something was wrong. He turned sharply to the side where there was a black silhouette among the trees and thought, "Is it that close?" From the steps of the monster, a tree fell behind Gangram, and he, looking at it in surprise, thought he got so close, but he didn't notice. This is impossible. He pulled out his sword and grinned nervously, thinking, but where did he come from? A huge gorilla jumped out of the forest towards him and raised his hand and grabbed the tree trunk with the other. Gangram at that moment held his breath and became invisible. The monster froze in place, looking puzzled at the place where he had just been. He saw his half-eaten fruit on the ground and began to look around in search of it. At this time, Gangram climbed onto the tree that the monster was holding in his hands, and then set the foliage on fire. The huge gorilla looked in shock at the tree that suddenly caught fire for some reason, and at that time Gangram jumped behind the monster and took out a sword. He swung it sharply from top to bottom and blood gushed from the monster's neck. He easily cut off the monster's head and was surprised, thinking that this turns out to be such excellent objects. He landed on the ground along with the monster's head and thought that he would not be able to use this sword against the people from the first zone. He doesn't think anyone will survive if he uses it. Putting the sword in his bag and wondering, then what should he do now? Find out where he came from? Some time after that, he climbed a tree and picked a blue fruit. The system reported that he received the item Heavenly Aromatic Fruit. He completed Hall of Said Sins on medium difficulty. Sitting on a branch, he put one fruit in the bag, and began to eat the second one and thought that first he would finish resisting the poison. Has the first zone arrived here yet? It is clear that the fruits have been picked from the trees. One of the gods asked why he was eating a raid item. Gangram picked the fruit again, and the system reported that he used the Heavenly Aromatic Fruit. Mana and experience increased. Poison resistance has been improved. Another god said he used it to increase mana and poison resistance. He thinks that's why the agency chose this place. Gangram continued to eat the fruits one by one, but he was already getting sick, and the gods asked how much he was going to eat. His mouth is already watering just at the sight. When he bit the fruit again, a message popped up in front of him that the ability class of poison resistance had been increased to the fate of a primary rank insect. Immediately after that, he leaned down and spat out the chewed fruit, and then a man's scream was heard. The guy from the first zone rubbed his hand over his face, on which the fruit mass fell, and his friend exclaimed, "What the hell? Did a piece of fruit fly into it?" He looked up at the tree and, seeing Gangram there, called his name and asked if he was from the second zone. Gangram asked how he knew his name. The guy replied that it didn't matter. Their leader is eager to communicate with him. Will he go with them? He pointed his finger at his friend, who was wiping his face with a handkerchief, and said that if he agreed, they would pretend that this did not happen. His friend said displeasedly that it was up to him to decide. One of them asked, "Do they remember the guys from the first team running away from him?" They said it was too strong. Gangram did not answer and thought, "Leader? Could he be one of those who ambushed him on the first day?" One of the gods admired him and said that Gangram has an ego. The other god said that he didn't seem to care at all. Gangram became interested in their proposal and came down from the tree, saying that he would go. The guy was happy and said that then they will go now. The gods were surprised at his decision, and soon the guys from the first zone led Gangram to their camp. All the people they passed by cast interested glances at Gangram, and he thought that there were twice as many people here as in their zone. They peer, but don't look scared. The girl from the first zone asked who it was. She was told that it was Gangram from the second zone. She asked in surprise, "Is it the same one?" The guys meanwhile led him to their leader's tent and told him to go inside. He moved the cloth aside and went inside and immediately saw a muscular man named Hong Dihun wiping his weapon with a cloth. Seeing him, Dihun asked, "Is he Gangram, right?" Gangram used his abilities and got a little nervous, asking who he is. Dihun threw the rag aside and introduced himself to him with a confident smile. He's glad to meet him. Gangram saw his fate window, in which it was written that he had a primary rank Ghost Fate class, attribute Gold. He looked at his weapon and thought in surprise, does he already have such a weapon? This is a copy of a weapon called the Heavenly Fire Blade. It has a tertiary rank Dragon Fate class. This is a long weapon that has many types of attack, blow, puncture, cut, and also it has high damage. Gangram thought that now he understood how they were the first in a past life to cope with the cleansing of all kingdoms. He asked what he wanted. Dihun rose from his chair and his eyes suddenly sparkled after Gangram's question. He waved his weapon and asked with a smile, "He's kind of rude, right?" He touched the tip of the blade to his forehead, but he did not even move or look away. Dihun was surprised by this and looked at it with interest. A blade wound appeared on Gangram's forehead, and he looked at him with a serious and confident look, after which Dihun invited him to work with them. He touched his forehead, wiped the blood, and asked, "Is that all? It looks like they haven't met the advanced conditions yet." He walked towards the exit of the tent and pushed the fabric aside, saying that this was a bad offer. He planned to be the first to clear the room. He waved his hand and said that was why he was leaving. But as soon as he came out, people blocked his path with swords. A lot of awakened people gathered near the tent, pointing weapons at him, and Dihun said that he was confused about something. While he's here, he has no choice. He put his weapon on his shoulder, and then smiled and said threateningly that if he did not help them, then he would die here. Gangram turned around and showed him the wooden sign with a grin, saying that if they tried, there would be no problems. Dihun was very surprised when he recognized the object in his hands. This is a symbol of Gongju's revenge. If the owner of this item dies at the hands of another person, the killer will be marked with a sign of revenge and will become the target of the Gongju leader. He thought, the head of Gongju will come after him if he kills this guy. He remembered receiving the weapon and message from the leader of Xiaomongyangniu and thought that this man was as strong as the one who sent him this weapon and the task to clear this room first. He sighed heavily and put his weapon away, asking if he also received the message. Gangram thought, is he too? Some time ago, when he was in the cafeteria, he suddenly received a message from Gongju. In the message he wrote that this was a test for the highest performing students. He needs to be the first to clear the room of said sins on the highest difficulty. He will receive a reward if successful, but in the meantime he will give him an item to help him for a while. Remembering this, he wondered if Dihun had received the weapon from the head of the first zone. It seems that the zone leaders also compete with each other. Dihun came out of the tent and waved to the others, asking for attention. The awakened were wary, and he said that they did not need to kill Gangram. He has a strange object. For whoever kills him, a killer will come. He called them the fourth group and said that was why he was ordering them to put it aside. Gangram asked, so can he go? Immediately after this, Dihun raised his weapon over him and with a smile told the others to beat him to death, but not completely. Gangram reacted quickly and ducked to avoid the blow, while Dihun ordered the others to take him. The awakened immediately attacked Gangram, and he smiled and said that if he was going to just get caught like that, he wouldn't have come here. He elbowed the man who wanted to punch him, but at the same moment another one jumped out in front of him. Gangram grabbed his arm and knocked him over, causing him to fall straight onto his comrade and crush him. After that, he held his breath and disappeared from sight, and his opponents stopped, looking for him. They started asking where did he go. Let them gather in a circle so as not to miss it. But it was too late. Gangram had already run past them, and when he was behind them, he hit one of them in the neck with the edge of his hand, and he lost consciousness. After that, he took out his sword and, having wounded one awakened one, used his stealth ability and, quickly moving forward, attacked the other, breaking through them. They had difficulty tracking his movements, and one of them asked, "Is this teleportation?" Because of his invisibility, the awakened ones could not detect him in such a commotion, and Dihun cursed loudly, telling them to get together. They should not scatter. He doesn't disappear, they just don't see him. They can't let him go. Gangram at this time was still using invisibility and headed towards the tent. He took out a peach from his bag and thought with a smile that it was already late. He began to scatter the fruits, but they didn't even notice it and began to trample them. A sweet aroma immediately appeared in the air, and they found traces of juice on the ground and began to ask what it was. Smells like something sweet. Gangram meanwhile hid behind a tent and summoned a flame in his hand with the thought that he had always wondered why his zone and the first were always on such bad terms. But now he understands that the agency was playing them off. He slowly left the camp, having first started an arson, and behind him were heard screams that the animals were advancing. There was a fire here. Someone shouted to them to put out the fire first. Moving away from the camp, Gangram deactivated his invisibility ability and gritted his teeth, thinking that Sua was saying that people were held hostage and killed here. His gaze became angry, and he thought that this was all for a simple reward. He can't let this happen again just because of some reward. But what should he do? He soon returned to the second zone camp and emptied all the blue fruits he had collected from his bag. He waved his hand and asked everyone to listen to him. As they already know, there are people here from other zones. Last night he heard that they were planning to ambush them. One of the guys got scared, and Sua asked, "Is it an ambush?" He looked at the fruit in his hand and said that he had a proposal. It will give everyone a heavenly aromatic fruit. It will allow them to clear the room on medium difficulty. It's all free. They were surprised and asked, "Is it free?" He recently sold soup for 200 pearls. He asked why don't they get out before they arrive. There's enough fruit for everyone, so let them tell others who's not here. And he will go until he changes his mind. The joyful guys took the fruit and thanked Gangram. He was about to leave, but Sua ran up to him and asked him to wait. She asked, will he also clear the room on medium difficulty? He turned around and asked why it was so important to her. He thought that she wasn't the type to set up her teammate for someone else. Moreover, she cannot be driven by greed. He walked into the forest and waved at her, saying that he wasn't even on their team. In his thoughts, he told her that they needed to pack up and leave. In this life, he was not her partner. She remained silent and looked worriedly at his retreating silhouette in the forest. Time passed. He returned back to the garden and, under the influence of invisibility, passed by the wounded gorilla, thinking that when he stumbled upon the monster here, it appeared out of nowhere. He hid behind a tree and started watching him, thinking that they couldn't appear like that. These are just beings living in kingdoms. They have their own shelters, like yeti nests. A gorilla, bleeding, crawled past him, and he followed it, running from tree to tree and wondering where they all come from. The monster climbed through a narrow passage in the tree trunk and disappeared, and Gangram now understood where they were coming from. He approached the tree and tried to crawl inside, but it was difficult for him, and he thought, how did he get here? Suddenly the tree sucked him in, and he quickly found himself inside, starting to fall down the trunk with thoughts that there was more space here than he had imagined. Finally he landed and walked forward, lighting his path with fire. He touched the bark of the tree and walked towards the exit where the light came from. His face lit up and pink petals flew inside. The sight he saw outside amazed him very much. He came out into a clearing, in the middle of which grew a huge tree with pink foliage. The gods said that the view here is so mesmerizing. Has this always been the place? Don't monsters live here? Red-green fruits grew on the tree and Gangram noticed them. He came closer and the gods told him to be careful. Monsters could appear out of nowhere. He thought that this is not so. For them it is just a passage. They are not fighting here. A poisonous haze began to emanate from the tree and he grinned, thinking that this was the most dangerous place in this demon realm. He noticed another narrow passage at the roots of the tree and wondered if the monsters were even deeper. After that, with the help of a sword, he climbed the tree and picked the fruit. The system reported that he received fruit of all flavors. He met the clearing conditions for the room on hard difficulty. He jumped down and thought that now he just needed to leave unnoticed. But as soon as he landed, an explosion thundered from the entrance to the clearing. From the explosion, dust rose and smoke appeared, and as soon as it cleared, Dihun came out, holding a girl in his hands, and behind him were members of his group. He smiled and thanked Gangram. Without him, he would not have found this place. Gangram frowned and asked if he was following him. Dihun confirmed his words and said that he shut up on him on the way to the second zone. Gangram looked down and finally noticed the girl he was holding in his hands. It was Joel. When he saw her, he froze in place and his face darkened. In horror, he released the fruit from his hands and it fell to the ground with a dull thud. Dihun said that since he couldn't kill him, He would kill his friends. What does he think about this? He lifted Joel and, putting a blade to her neck, said that she would live if he gave the fruit. Gangram looked at him in horror, and then replied that he had nothing to give him. He crushed the fruit with his foot, and then pointed his finger at the tree and said that if he wanted, then let him take it himself. Let him take as much as his heart desires. Dihun asked his group, did they hear everything? He will take it upon himself, and let them take the fruit. Members of his group ran to the tree and said that they were on their way. One of them turned around and joyfully exclaimed that they could finally return. Another guy asked Dihun if he would share a share with them. He confirmed their words and Gangram told him to let Joel go. He replied that first let him throw down his weapon. Then he threw her on the ground and said that he had to pick her up himself. With a wide smile on his face, he pointed the weapon at her and said that he could do this, if he had the courage, of course. Without hesitation for a second, Gangram pulled out his sword from its sheath and threw it to the ground. Dihun was surprised that he agreed to this so easily, and at that time he sat down next to Joel and put her head on his lap, spreading her eyelids. He called her, but she did not respond. Then he opened her mouth wider, and then poured the antidote from the bag directly into her mouth. Dihun asked what he just fed her. Gangram lifted her up and replied that it was an antidote. Dihun grinned and said that he didn't poison her. Before he could finish speaking, the members of his group fell from the tree with a roar. He turned his gaze in their direction and, seeing several more people falling to the ground, loudly asked what was wrong with them. One of them said that he could not see anything, and the guy next to him grabbed his head and said that he was dizzy. Dihun immediately thought that this was the work of Gangram and shouted loudly, "What the hell did he do?" At the same moment, blood sprayed from his mouth and the system notified that he had been inhaling fruit vapors of all aromas for too long. Gangram looked up at him and asked with a smile, did he understand after all? Poisonous steam was circling next to them all this time, and Dihun did not even suspect it. The system reported that poisonous fumes from fruits of all flavors surrounded him. He froze in place in confusion and thought, poisonous fumes? But why? So he knew all this? He remembered how Gangram poured the antidote into the girl's mouth, and immediately after that, in a rage, he swung his weapon in his direction, but he managed to move away. Dihun twirled the weapon in his hands, furiously shouting his name, before pouncing on him again and telling him to give him the antidote. He swung his weapon forward several times, and Gangram began to dodge and think, why is he still on his feet? At one point the tip of his weapon still wounded his shoulder and blood sprayed out. The system reported that the poison enters the body through open wounds. A new cut appeared on Gangram's cheek, and the system reported that the poison had overcome the resistance to poisons. It was filled with poisonous vapors. He pulled back, avoiding Dihun's quick and sharp blows, and lit a flame in his hand with the thought that he would not last long here. He turned around with a wave of his hand and directed the flame towards the fruit tree. The fruits immediately caught fire and began to emit even stronger vapors. The system immediately notified that the poisonous vapors were intensified. From such a dose of poison, Dihun became even worse and blood sprayed out of his mouth again. He began to lose his balance, and at that time Gangram crouched down and covered his face with his hand. Having fallen to the ground, Dihun crawled towards Gangram and with a crazy smile asked, "Does he want them both to die?" Gangram pulled out a 7-branch sword from his bag and said that only he would die. Dihun realized that he would kill him and asked for mercy. He needs to stay alive to keep those who ambushed the second zone at bay. Gangram swung his hand sharply, wounding him in the head, and said that if he really wanted to live, he would understand that threatening him with violence against people from the second zone was a bad idea. The bloody 7-branch sword fell to the ground. He sat down next to Joel. The poison filling him made him feel sick, and he began to breathe heavily. The system reported that the ability to steal fate was activated. The forced collection of Hong Dihun's strength, mana, and agility began. CO Gangram class promotion to tertiary rank human destiny. He took Joel's hand and ran his finger along the bloody trail on the inside of her palm, telling her that she didn't need to follow him. After that, he began to look for something in his bag, and the god said that he had found time to relax. He pulled an egg out of the bag and untied its mouth, and the gods asked what he was doing. The other god replied that he was feeding the egg. God cursed and asked, "Did he set it on fire to get out of here?" The egg in Gangram's hands began to emit a bright blue light, and a message about growth progress of 100% was displayed in front of it. The egg hatches. From a bright glow in front of him appeared an animal that looked like a fawn. One of the gods recognized this beast and exclaimed, "Is this a killin?" But how? Walking through the air, the killin headed towards its owner. He rubbed his head against Gangram's forehead, and the cleansing began. Because of the abilities of the killin, Gangram immediately became better, and the poisonous fumes left him. The killin headed towards the tree, dispersing all the poison around and clearing the clearing. The little beast happily jumped around the tree, cleaned it, and the system reported that the poison of the fruit of all flavors had been cleansed. Gangram said it was great. The killin immediately stopped and reacted to the owner's voice. Gangram approached the tree and said that they need to take the fruits before all that remains is ashes. At this time Joel woke up. She stood up and rubbed her sore head with her hand. Gangram noticed this and said that if she came to her senses, then let her come here. The killin hurriedly disappeared, and Joel turned around at his voice and called out to him in surprise. Soon they both crawled out of the crack in the tree trunk and found themselves outside. Sua and Baum were nearby, and upon noticing Gangram and Joel, they ran towards them and called out to them. Judging by their appearance, during this time they had already managed to get dirty in something. Sua happily told them that she was so worried. Seeing her appearance, Gangram became worried and asked what happened. "They are all right?" She replied that Father Johann cured everyone. "It's all the blood of monsters." Baum, with a wide smile on her face, said that everyone from the first zone ran away. She noticed her sister and walked up to her, starting to scold her. She crossed her arms and exclaimed, what was she even thinking about? She already believed that she had been kidnapped. Joel laughed guiltily, and Gangram looked down at her with an angry look and replied that she was captured by the captain of the first zone. Joel was dissatisfied and said that she asked him to keep it a secret. This news made Baum even more angry with her sister. She placed a worried hand on her shoulder, and Sua told Gangram that they should have followed them right away. He said that this would not have happened if they had completed the room on medium difficulty. Why didn't they leave? She sighed with a smile and asked how could they leave him. He replied that she could help others as much as she wanted, but she should not endanger her own comrades. She answered with a gentle smile that he was not the others. She looked at the twins and the Holy Father who approached them with Gajun, and said that everyone here considers him a comrade, so she invites him to fight together next time. Hearing these words and seeing her happy smile, he blushed a little and remembered the notifications about the intertwining of fate that arose after passing joint tests with his friends. He touched his face in embarrassment and thought that now it was too late for him to move away from them, and then replied that he would think about it. Soon he left the fifth gate, and a message appeared in front of him that he had cleared the room of said sins. He successfully completed the room on the highest difficulty, and, as a reward for the first clearing, he receives a compass of fate. He reached into the system window and pulled out a compass. In the description of the item, he read that the compass of fate predicts his future. He tried tapping the compass with his finger and thought, does it work automatically? For some reason he can't use it. Suddenly the compass was activated, and this made him surprised. The arrows began to spin at breakneck speed, and a magical seal appeared. He watched this thoughtfully for a while, and then he was surprised when a message about the change in his fate popped up in front of him. Gongju, meanwhile, was spinning up system windows around itself and viewing information about the rooms. He thought it was strange. The result of Gangram in the rooms is unusual. He completed a difficult location, Knife Mountain, in just a day. What happened in the Hellfire Hall is also extremely suspicious. He was even able to defeat the Yeti in a hidden location from the Hall of Ice. And he was able to pull all this off with the insignificant tertiary rank of an insect. He took off the mask from his face and put it on the table, saying that most likely, the disappearance of the Sword of Seven Branches from the Forest of Swords was also his doing. He put on his glasses and remembered how the leader of the first zone complained to him about her defeat, thinking that he should not have defeated Dihun so easily in the Room of Said Sins. And what's most interesting is that the leader of the first zone after the defeat thought that it was he who told him about the Killen. It is extremely difficult to hatch a Killen. The food must be of the right attribute, and the egg's normal diet contains a lot of meat. In natural conditions, the chance tends to 0. That's a coincidence. The help of some god, despite the fact that he rejected each of them. He no longer knows what to think. He took out a key and a piece of paper in the shape of a man from under his clothes, saying that he needed to give him a test. Maybe he can read fate. Soon he invited Gangram to his place, and he, frozen in the passage, began to look around. Gongju asked him to come here and took out the key, saying that as he promised, he would give him a special reward. He used the key and Gangram was surprised. His gaze froze on the wall, and he thought that just a few minutes before there was a wall here, and now it had disappeared. Gongju walked into the opened room where there were many different weapons, and asked if he was surprised. It is a pocket dimension from which he has made a personal arsenal. He can open it at any time if he has the key. Gangram said it was cool. He went inside and Gongju said with a smile that he could choose any one thing. Gangram thought about it and asked, "What do you want?" He replied with a sly smile that he could choose anything. He began to watch Gangram walking through his arsenal in search of suitable weapons, and then he looked down at the key and thought that this was a small test. He changed all the weapons here. Low-rank weapons now have interesting descriptions and look more valuable than they actually are. High-end items have questionable descriptions and generic handles, and they look like ordinary weapons, and all this to find out if he has the ability to read fates. Without this, he cannot know the class of the weapon. For example, in the weapon's fate window, the name, fate, and rank used to be shown, as well as a description revealing its abilities. And now the description of the weapons is simplified so that he will not be able to understand their value. But if he can read fates, then it will be a different story. Gangram at this time used his ability and looked at the weapon with a smile. He took one of the swords in his hands and read the information, and then returned it to its place and, looking at the other windows of fate, thought that he probably got rid of the really strong examples. But there are a couple above the ghost class. He looked to the side and thought with a grin that this guy was very generous. Suddenly his gaze came across something interesting and a wide smile appeared on his face. He saw a blade with gold inlays on the stand and thought that this sword looked very rare. He saw the fate window of this weapon. It was written there that this is a strong, good quality insect fate sword of the primary rank. He was surprised and thought, the primary rank of an insect? He noticed something peculiar among the weapons in this arsenal and looked around, thinking that it was all very strange. He deactivated his fate detection ability and looked around again. He raised his hand to his face and thought about why the appearance of all the objects in this room did not correspond to the description. He looked at Gongju with a grin and thought, is he testing him? He knew that things couldn't be that simple. But it makes sense if he wants to test his skills. Most likely he used an object that hides the real windows of fate. The smile disappeared from his face and he thought that he had almost driven him into a corner. If there are only a few people who can read fates, the agency closely monitors them. He would watch him more closely if he knew about it. He looked at the weapon again and wondered, should he hide its ability or get a good item? What's better? Having made a decision, he turned around and walked towards Gongju, and he asked, has he already decided? Gangram confirmed his words and pointed his finger at him, saying that he wanted it. Gongju didn't listen to him until the end and was very surprised when he saw him pointing at him. He exclaimed excitedly, does he want it? Gangram froze in place and was speechless and thought, What kind of nonsense? He wanted to resolve the misunderstanding and say that this is not so, but Gong Ju interrupted him and nodded contentedly, smilingly saying that he was smart. He raised his head proudly and told him that he realized that he was the most valuable thing in this room. He agrees, he attracts people very much, but he will never be able to get it. Gangram said that he was actually pointing to the key in his hand. He smiled and pointed to the arsenal, saying that he wanted him to lend him the weapons that were there. It will be much more profitable for him. He won't have to part with anything from this room, and the second zone will continue to be the best. Gong Ju became interested in this sentence and thought about his words. Time passed. Gangram returned to the room with a bag of food for his pet and, pouring it into a plate, said that it was time to eat. Here is ginseng. It is healthy and tasty. The Killen looked at him happily and then began to eat, and he said that copying the key would take 3 days. During this time he needs to make it as strong as he can. He tore open a new bag of food and remembered something. When he bought food, he spent a considerable amount in the cafeteria, and the dolls made him a VIP client. He never thought that he would have to spend 12,000 pearls in 1 day. Feeding a Killen is not a cheap matter. He added more food and asked if he liked it. Then let him eat and grow up faster. Suddenly a blue light began to emanate from his pet, and he was surprised. A message popped up in front of him that the Killen was now a secondary rank illusory fate class. He gains the ability to control water, and can now move freely in the water and control it. He thought, can he control water now? He pointed his finger at the wall and told him to try using his new ability over there. The Killen looked up from his food and looked at the wall, and then lowered his head and closed his eyes, beginning to create a ball of water above him. This ball quickly grew in size and covered Gangram with its shadow. He looked at the ball above him, puzzled, and then became nervous and asked his pet to stop. But at that moment the Killen had already sent a water ball into the wall, and upon collision there was a roar, and Gangram was splashed with water. A huge hole appeared in the wall, which led into the room of another student who woke up from such noise. Poor Sangwon was unlucky to be Gangram's neighbor, and while drops of water flowed down him, he silently tried to move away from his suddenly interrupted sleep and looked at him through the hole. After that, he screamed loudly and, pulling the blanket over himself, called out to Gangram with displeasure, but he remained silent, realizing his guilt. Time passed. The twins and several other students were sitting in the cafeteria, laughing and chatting about something. The twins ate in silence, and the guys at a table nearby were happy about the food here. One of them said that he was so tired of eating only fruit. His friend said that if it weren't for the food that Gangram sold, it would have been really bad. He seemed somehow cold to him, but he seemed like a good person. The guy replied that he had always been good, he just didn't notice it. He once helped them when they were surrounded by wolves, and when they were bitten by monsters before the teaching began. The guy sitting next to him asked, "Is this true? Why didn't they unite then?" He sighed and replied that he really was very cold, and he didn't know him. He just gave them those fruits so they could finish the room on medium difficulty. He somehow even felt lousy that he treated him like that. Gangram entered the cafeteria and told Sangwon that he was glad that he liked his new room. But he will still pay for the food. Sangwon followed him in and said that he was only polite because he was the first to clear, like him. Gangram asked, was he also the first? Sangwon proudly pointed his finger at himself and said that he was the first to complete the room of said sins on low difficulty. They went to the delivery counter and Gangram realized why he had not seen him for so long. He said it was cool, even though it was low difficulty. Even after he almost died. Sangwon agreed with him and raised his head proudly, saying that it makes sense to talk to him. The other guys aren't even close to his level. He stopped him with a wave of his hand and said that they had better have a glass. He showed the doll 2 fingers and asked for 2 drinks. The doll looked at him and then pointed his hand at the sign that displayed the amount of pearls he had absorbed. Sangwon asked the doll not to be like that. Let him just give it to him. He will pay double the amount next time. But the doll did not listen to him and hit him in the face with a sign that said no credit. Sangwon pressed his hand to his red cheek from the blow, and hit the table with his other hand and said that he was so funny. Does he even know who he is? The doll crossed her arms over her chest and looked at him mockingly, which made him even angrier. He exclaimed, "He dares to look at him high. He's just a dirty doll." Gangram with a sigh put his hands on his shoulders and called his name, saying that he will pay, so let him stop pestering this poor little man. Sangwon looked at him with a grin and asked how much he has. He's just a half-time predictor. Gangram wearily touched his head and, having already regretted his previous place of work, said that it was time for him to remember that everyone here pays with pearls. He asked the dolls how much it would cost. With smiles they showed him a sign that for VIP one portion is free. They, together with the local sommelier doll, began to mix his cocktail and Sangwon asked, "VIP?" Gangram replied that they have been calling him that since yesterday, when he spent 12,000 pearls. He turned to the dolls and said that let them pour it for him too. He was with him. Sangwon at this time was very surprised that he was able to earn such a sum. The dolls finished preparing the cocktail and one of them pushed the glass towards Sangwon with her foot. After that, the doll walked away and looked at him with an arrogant look. This gesture greatly offended and angered him. He bit his lower lip in rage and then hit the doll with his glass and exclaimed, "Who does he take him for?" From the noise that arose, the twins and others looked in their direction. Gangram didn't like this and asked what he was doing. Sangwon loudly called him a jerk and he told him to shut up. Angrily stamping his feet, he left the cafeteria, and Gangram looked after him and asked, "What the hell?" At that moment the twins ran up to him and asked the doll if he was okay. The doll began to swear, and Bomb said that she would ask Anavi to punish him. Joel at this time asked the master, "Is this his friend?" He replied that this was not so. Bomb asked, "Then what were they doing here together?" He replied that he was in the next room when the Killen broke through the wall, so he wanted to apologize and buy him lunch, but it didn't work out. Bomb's eyes lit up with delight and she asked, "Killen?" After that, Gangram summoned a Killen and showed it to the girls. A joyful blush appeared on their faces and they began to stroke him, saying that he was so cute. Bomb asked what his name was. He replied that his name was Killen. They asked why. He replied that it was because it was a Killen. The girls looked at him dissatisfied and fell silent for a few seconds, and then Bomb said that this was a spiritual animal, and not just a Killen. Joel asked, would he like it if he called him just a person? Gangram scratched the back of his head hesitantly and asked, do they want him to name it? He thought about it and asked, maybe Linny? Linny sparkled with joy, and the system reported that Linny's Fate class had been promoted to primary rank Ghost Fate. Linny gains the ability of a magnetic horn. This ability allows him to attract or change the trajectories of gold attribute projectiles. Gangram looked at the window of fate in surprise, and one of the twins asked what it was. Has he really evolved? Gangram thought that this was not just a Killen, it was his Killen. Linny came up to him and began to rub against his hand, and he asked, what is it? Does he want to join the team too? Joel smiled and asked, he understands that they did this, right? He agreed with them, and then took Linny in his arms and thanked them with a smile on his face. Joel wanted to ask something, but Bomb quickly covered her mouth with her hand and said that if he wants to thank them, then he should go with them to the next room. He asked, next? They both nodded, and he asked, don't they all just come in when it opens? Meanwhile, the gate to the next room was sealed and fenced, and the awakened ones waited to open. A week has passed. The Viper's room is open. The conditions stated that they needed to protect something for 168 hours. Having passed through the portal, the students of the second zone found themselves on a river island with a large tree. They looked at the tree with admiration, and one of them asked what they should protect. He turned his gaze to the container that stood nearby and asked, maybe this container or that tree? An inspector named Jeongmin came out of the container and waved his hand at them with a smile, asking if they were students from the 2nd District of Seoul, right? He said his name and said that he was from the Mission Protection Agency. He was the head of this room. Gangram looked at the new inspector in surprise, and Gajun watched his reaction. Sua at this time asked, "Is he like their guide?" Baum said that they also have task windows, like in the Hall of Hellfire or Knife Mountain. Sua asked if this means that the agency itself is setting a goal for them. Gangram at this time was still puzzled by the new inspector and thought, "Why isn't Anavi here? In a past life she was here." Jiangmin climbed up the tree and waved his hands at them, saying that he had loaded the details into the manual, so now he would quickly tell them everything. One of the awakened ones asked, "Leadership?" The guy next to him showed him a thing that looked like a phone and said this is the thing they were given when they first came. He asked who would wear this all the time anyway. Jiangmin, meanwhile, picked up the snake with a headband with a name written on it and said that their task in this room was to protect the snake. The students asked, "This snake?" He replied that everyone will have their own. He removed the cloth from the snake and said that they would have this sign of affection. They need to tie this cloth around the snake. He held out the cloth and told them to take it and go on their way. Everyone needs to find the snake quickly. The rules for the Viper's room were written in the manual. 1 snake per person. They need to tame the snake using a sign of affection and protect it for 168 hours. Second rule, they can leave the room, but if their snake dies while they are away, they lose. Third, the snake cannot leave the room, but they can leave it under the supervision of Jiangmin, but not more than 6 hours a day. During this time the snake will be under his protection, and if anything happens, they can take a new snake to continue the mission. Fourth, if they meet a great serpent, then under no circumstances should they call it a snake. After that, all the awakened ones crossed to the other side using bridges and went into the forest in search. Joel looked into the bushes and asked, "Is there a snake here?" Her sister found some kind of bird in the hollow and replied that they were not here. Gajun at this time found 2 snakes at once, but he did not like their size. The Holy Father was looking in the bushes at that time, but the snake suddenly jumped out at him, and out of fear he shouted an incomprehensible curse. Sua got worried and called him. Sangwon at this time found a snake and tied it with a cloth, telling it to calm down. His name appeared on the fabric and the countdown began. He looked at his snake with a smile and gave it a name that sounded like a curse word. He handed it over to his assistants and said let them take care of it. The guys asked, "Isn't it their job to protect him?" He replied that this was true, so they should protect his snake too. He crossed his arms over his chest and asked joyfully, "Since he came here before Gangram, he started defending earlier, right?" They hesitantly agreed with him, and he said that he would be the first. The guys started whispering among themselves, and one of them asked why he started constantly mentioning Gangram. His friend shrugged and replied that he had no idea. Sangwon at this time exclaimed that Gangram would no longer get the better of him. At that time, Gangram crossed the bridge with Linny and was lost in his thoughts. He wonders what the compass was trying to warn him about. Maybe that the Room of Sins was passed much earlier in a past life, or that the suspension of the portal affected, or that the inspector is different. A lot of things are different from the past. He doesn't understand what the problem is. A message surfaced that the course of Gangram's fate had been changed. A return to normal fate had begun. Everything will be as he wants only in the first change of fate. He stopped in the middle of the bridge and, looking at the cloth in his hand, thought, maybe this is connected with what he is doing. In the destiny window of the affection mark, it was written that it has a human destiny of primary rank. If he puts this on an animal, it will no longer be afraid of him. The effect depends on the class of the user and the animal. Linny began to jump around his owner, and the gods noticed that he stopped and asked what he was doing. Shouldn't he be looking for the snake? He doesn't want to look. Maybe then he'll let them have it. He thought they were so annoying. He is unlikely to get an answer to the question if he only worries about it. He put his hands on the collar of his cloak and said it was time to move out. He took off his coat and put it in his bag, and then took off his t-shirt and looked at the pet, saying that they had to go. The gods were puzzled by his actions, and then he jumped off the bridge and fell straight into the river, and Linny jumped after him. Gangrym held his breath and dived, and then looked at the underwater world that opened up to him. One of the gods said that he must be looking for a snake. Another god asked him to remind how long people can hold their breath. The system informed Gangrym that the lung capacity had increased by 20% due to the water attribute. He swam down and looked at Linny with a smile, pointing his finger at himself. Linny realized what he needed to do and activated the ability to control water. Gangrym received the effect of the ability to control water and was now able to move and breathe freely. He immediately inhaled air and then, pushing off the stones, descended closer to the bottom of the river. He noticed movement behind him and saw a small snake that got scared when it noticed his gaze on him. He and Linny swam even lower, and one of the gods asked where he was going. Snakes on the other side. Gangrym continued to swim, looking around in search of the snake he needed. One of the gods said that there are no snakes down there. He smiled slightly and thought, do they think he came down here just for them? He wants someone else. Suddenly a huge beast appeared behind him, opened its mouth, and the god cursed, exclaiming that this was a great serpent. Hearing this, Gangrym got scared and immediately turned around. But he quickly reacted, and when the serpent was about to close his jaws on him, he took out the Dihun weapon and did not let the monster do it. He thought it was so good that he had a heavenly fire blade. It's the only long-range weapon he has right now. The sharp blades pierced the upper jaw of the serpent, and Gangrym grabbed its tongue and thought that it was too big to be a snake and too small to be a dragon. He smiled and thought that this must be that great serpent. He is lucky. He needs to fix the sign of affection on the it language. When he took out the cloth and began to tie the serpent's tongue, water began to bubble in his throat. A magical water clot formed there, and Gangrym, noticing this at the last moment, became nervous. Linny immediately came to the aid of his master and hit him with a stream of water, pushing him out of the serpent's mouth. Gangrym wrapped a cloth around his hand and praised his pet in his thoughts. The serpent's red eyes sparkled at this time, watching him intently. Linny helped Gangrym quickly swim away in the other direction, and the serpent noticed this and aimed at him. It quickly swam up to Linny and opened its mouth wide to devour him. But at that moment Gangrym tied a cloth around its body, and the sign of affection was activated. The serpent began to resist, moving chaotically, and Gangrym tried to hold on to the fabric. He gritted his teeth and tightened the knot tighter, trying to subdue the monster. The name Gangrym appeared on the fabric, and the system reported that the great serpent was now subordinate to him. The serpent calmed down and looked at the owner, and he loosened his grip and calmly sat down on its body. God asked in surprise, did he tame it? The other god replied that he didn't even know. Let him look into his eyes. God said that at least it does not see him as an enemy. Gangrym looked at the serpent with a smile and pointed his finger up, asking him to rise. After a few seconds they approached the surface, and the serpent jumped out of the water, splashing water around. Gangrym climbed onto the bridge and patted it on the head, saying that it did well. Now he has to defend it all week. But it can handle itself, right? He will untie this fabric in 7 days, and for now let it remain in the water and live an ordinary life. The serpent looked at him with a puzzled look, and then nodded and dived under the water. One of the gods said that he neglected it immediately after taming. The other god replied that it was a serpent, so everything was in order. Linny shook himself off the water, and Gangrym said with a smile that he was taking a week off for himself. God called him a cunning idiot and said that's why he did all this. Time passed. He began to hunt monsters, and a pile of corpses had already accumulated on the ground. Linny wearily watched him from behind a tree, and when he cut off the head of the last monster, his strength level rose to 26 and the killen's strengthening ended. At the moment, his stamina and mana are level 23, and his agility and perception are 26. He sighed and thought that it was difficult for him to increase his stats through regular hunting. Even though his fate class was now higher, he sheathed his sword and told Linny that they would take a short break. Linny fell exhausted to the ground, and one of the gods asked, "Killin don't like blood, right?" Another god said that putting a buff on him was a good idea. Gangram pulled the pearls out of the monster's mouth and looked at Linny with the thought that he thought it was very difficult for him to kill. Suddenly screams were heard from the side, and someone said that he was an idiot. Gangram looked in the direction of the sound and thought that students usually don't fight each other in this room. A guess suddenly occurred to him, causing his face to darken. He rushed into the forest and worriedly told Linny to quickly follow him. He soon reached the waterfall and sat down, beginning to watch the people below. Someone exclaimed, "What else should they do? Let him just return the money." The other person shouted back that he couldn't. Gangram took a closer look at them and recognized them. It turned out to be Sangwon and his assistants. The guy got angry and said that he would make up for the damage when they returned, but now let him act on his own. Sangwon asked in surprise, "What does this mean?" The guy silently went into the forest, and his other assistants said that they were tired of it. "He is simply unbearable, Gangram this, Gangram that. Why shouldn't he hire him then?" Gangram heard this and thoughtfully asked, "Hire?" The gods advised him to talk to him. "Looks like he's in a difficult situation. He thinks he can pull a couple of pearls out of him." He thought about it, and God said that he needed money to feed Linny. Gangram remembered how the doll hit Sangwon and said that he was broken. Sangwon heard his voice and exclaimed, "Who is there?" He looked up and saw Gangram and said his name in surprise. After that, he slapped his hand on his chest and, almost with tears in his eyes, asked him to help his snake. After that, they ran together through the forest, and Gangram asked, "It turns out that his snake was attacked, but he can't do anything because he lost it." Sangwon confirmed his words, and he asked what would happen to him from this. Sangwon replied disgruntledly that he had not yet paid him for lunch. Gangram immediately stopped and said that he does not work for free. He will buy lunch when they return. Sangwon became very nervous and, looking at the number of his pearls, exclaimed that he had 2,000 pearls. Gangram said, "That is so much. Did he take it from his partners?" The system informed Gangram that the negotiations were completed, and he, with a smile, said that the pearls had arrived. At this time, a red notification appeared in front of Sangwon that the health of the target, marked with the sign of affection, had dropped below half. He grabbed his head and said that if they were done, then they needed to go save his snake. They soon reached a small clearing where they mercilessly beat the Sangwon snake. A student from another zone swung his sword several times, inflicting new wounds on the snake, and said that this snake was finished. Gangram quickly appeared in front of him and blocked his blow with his sword, causing the guy to be surprised. He looked at him displeasedly and asked, "What zone is he from?" He was the first to find this snake, so let him look for another one. Gangram threw the snake to its owner and replied that this would not do. Sangwon caught his snake and called out to it in concern as he looked at the wounds. He sat down on the ground and took out the medicine, with tears in his eyes asking him to live. "Here are the medicines, let it wake up quickly." A guy from another zone looked at this with a blank expression on his face, and Gangram noticed it. Sangwon exclaimed, "Who is he to try to kill his snake?" The guy sheathed his sword and asked, "Is this his snake?" Sangwon showed him his name on the bandage and said that the snake had his mark on it. Let him look for another one. The guy asked, "Why does he need this?" Gangram asked, "Isn't that the mission in this room?" He asked what they were talking about. He opened the system window and, after checking his task, said that his task was to kill them. He thought that everything was not so simple. Gangram and Sangwon were very surprised when they heard that they had a completely different task. Gangram thought that in a past life, the third zone had a different mission. This is what the change in fate meant. Then both zones protected the snakes, working together against the monsters. That's why Sua and this idiot. Suddenly his thought was replaced by another, and he was very surprised when he thought about something. A red message appeared in front of him indicating that the target marked with the affection mark was under attack. He immediately turned towards the river and thought, "Someone attacked the serpent. If this is the third zone, then this is definitely him." Meanwhile, his old friend stood on the bridge, and the serpent grinned threateningly. Tihun grinned when faced with a formidable opponent and clenched his hand into a fist. The serpent releases a stream of water that destroys the bridge, but Tihun manages to jump to the side and dodges it. He looks at this creature in surprise and asks, "Is it really a dragon?" He raises his fist and is about to say something. He charges at this monster and says loudly that he wants to see if killing this thing can accomplish his mission. Gangram quickly runs towards them and is surprised when he spots Tihun attacking the tamed monster. He delivers a very strong blow with his fist to the serpent he attacked. He smiles and thinks it's great. He almost did. Suddenly, Gangram moves the serpent away with the help of water magic and stands between them. He stabs with his sword and stops the blow from Tihun, who asks who he even is. Gangram looks at him with a small smile and thinks that he knew it would be him, Jang Tihun. He reminisces about the past when he called him Hyung and says that he wasn't there last time, so now he just has to go. Harang moves aside and says she will go. Tihun turns around and tells Hyung that he has to promise that he will come to the party. Gangram remembers that each of them died. In present time, he lands on another part of the destroyed bridge and thinks that he was a member of the Flying Tiger sect. He didn't expect to see it, but it's still nice. Tihun says that he will forget about it because he has never seen it before, but this time he has his own thoughts. Gangram turns and tells the serpent that it must go deep down. It should also not come out, no matter what. Tihun was very surprised by this and loudly said that it was running away from here. He makes an obscene gesture with his hand and says that he should leave here. He stands in his way. He needs to kill this monster. Gangram looks at him and thinks that he has never seen him so young. In a past life, he first met him in a sect. He remembers the past and thinks that this is a completely different atmosphere. At that time, Tihun was more polite, carrying Harang on his shoulders and calling him by name. He said that he was glad that he did not meet him in the demon realms. Gangram asks why he says that. Tihun looked away and says that he was a little aggressive back then. Gangram thinks that it is unlikely that they would have become friends with him if they met here in a past life. Tihun kicks the bridge hard and asks loudly if he even heard him. Gangram points to the side with a kind expression and asks why doesn't he find another snake. This is his great serpent. Tihun was surprised by this and with a dissatisfied expression on his face asks if this belongs to him. He throws a punch that Gangram dodged and loudly says that in that case, he will beat him first. He immediately raises his hand to strike again and asks loudly, "Is he going to continue dodging?" Gangram blocks his punch with his sword and his hands shake violently due to the recoil from the blow. A small smile appears on his face and he wonders, did he become so strong so early? Tihun jumps to another part of the bridge and asks why he is smiling. Is this funny to him? Gangram surprises him by agreeing and saying it's funny. He directs energy into his sword and wonders how he cannot be happy when he is here again, alive. The system notifies that its attribute has been changed to fire. He throws multiple blows with his sword, but Tihun blocks it all with his metal-plated gloves. Gangram continues to strike and thinks he has a secondary rank ghost fate. He is superior to him in class and characteristics. He asks if he really fell into a stupor because he couldn't cope with it, although he was much stronger. Tihun gets angry because of this, throws a strong punch with his fist, and is about to say something. Gangram beats him to it, agrees and asks how he knew about this. He strikes Tihun's torso with the hilt of his sword, causing him to cough up blood. Gangram swings his sword, looks at it with a smile and thinks that he knows all his techniques well. Tihun's body begins to shake violently after this blow. He clenches his teeth tightly and is about to say something. Gangram points his sword at him and says that it seems he has become the winner. He puts his sword in his inventory and looks at Tihun and loudly says that he will come back and beat him. Gangram, with a kind expression and a smile, waves at him and thinks that he looks like a real villain. His face has become less cheerful and he thinks that on the other hand, this is not very good. If this goes on, he won't meet Sua, which means he won't join the Flying Tiger sect. If he entered the Asura sect instead, it would be life or death. Gangram, with a very serious and worried expression on his face, says that he cannot allow this to happen. Sometime later, someone says very loudly that he should have warned earlier that other zones were hunting snakes. Jiangmin asks, but it doesn't really matter if they protect the snakes from monsters or other people. A very angry Sangwon grabs his clothes and asks if he is serious now. He leaves him in a very bad mood and loudly tells his snake that they should get out of here. Gangram waves his hand and asks for forgiveness to get his attention. Jiangmin notices him and asks if he has a question. Gangram approaches him and asks if the goal of the Destiny Protection Agency is not to create as many awakened ones as possible. He doesn't understand why they should fight each other. Jiangmin says this is all to weed out those who are not qualified enough or who are being helped. For example, such people are sent to clear rooms with an object that they received from someone more powerful. Gangram is confused by what he said and asks if he wants to say that it is his fault. Jiangmin says with a sly smile that this time they don't have many snakes, so if everyone protects the snakes, unfortunately, someone won't get one. Gangram, with a very serious expression on his face, clenches his teeth and thinks about all this. The system notifies you about this, that the protection of the Great Serpent is 22 hours, 17 minutes and 58 seconds out of 168 hours. The gods who watch over him say that it is he. They've already been waiting for him. They are so excited. Gangram looks around and asks if something happened while he was gone. He goes to the bridge and says that there was no notification of the attack on the serpent. He looks ahead, takes out his sword, and thinks that something is approaching. He sees a human silhouette running very quickly towards him. This man delivers a very strong blow, but Gangram manages to jump to the side and dodge this attack. Tihun, who attacked him, gets up and says that he has finally found him. Gangram asks did he say he found it. Does he have something to do with him? Tihun quickly runs towards him with a very wide smile and loudly says that he needs to fulfill his promise. He throws a punch, which Gangram was able to block with his sword. He remembers what happened last time and with a calm expression on his face thinks that the next blow will be from the left. He will fight with him a little, otherwise he will not calm down. Tihun surprised him very much by throwing a kick, but Gangram managed to notice this and thinks that he still used this technique. He blocks this blow with his hand and thinks that he has changed it. Perhaps he realized that he knew his techniques. He is thrown back strongly after this blow and slides several meters back. Gangram's shaking hand is left with a mark from this blow, and he thinks that it is probably difficult to change his usual movements. This is impressive. Tihun looks at him with a joyful smile and says that it has finally happened. Gangram asks why he wants to fight so badly. He could just look for another snake. Tihun points his finger at him and says it's because he lost to him last time. He raises his hand and with a serious expression on his face says that he doesn't like this. Gangram looks at him with a serious expression on his face and thinks that he always liked to fight with those who are stronger than him. He remembers what happened earlier and thinks that that's why he didn't even think about it, because in his previous life he didn't have any special abilities. Has he really gone crazy? It's strange to somehow be glad that they are now enemies. He channels energy into his sword and thinks that if he loses, the Great Serpent will die, so he has no choice. He calls him by name and says that he relies on him. Tihun doesn't understand what he means and loudly asks what kind of nonsense he is talking about. Gangram sets his sword on fire, looks at him with glowing eyes with a wide smile, and says that he should just not die. The system notifies that the combat instinct ability is activated. He begins to see and hear worse, and Tihun, who stands in front of him, asks if he really thinks that someone like him can kill him. He runs to him very quickly and says that he was very mistaken if he decided that he would cope with him the same way as last time. Gangram stares at him, his eyes filled with strong energy. He repels his punch with his sword with a smile, agrees, and says that he is strong enough. They continue to fight, and he thinks he likes it this way. Ti-hun throws an energy-based elbow strike, and Gangram dodges the attack. He grabs his hand with a joyful expression on his face and thinks about killing tough guys. With his other hand, he slashes with his sword, which surprises Ti-hun. Gangram looks at how blood flows from his wound and thinks that this is like a separate form of art. Ti-hun looks at him with a worried expression and wonders what is going on now. They throw many blows at each other, which they reflect, and he thinks that this freak was aiming for his vital points. Is he really going to kill him, or is he just going crazy? Yesterday he was a completely different person. Ti-hun swings his fist into which he channels energy and thinks that this way he can lose again. He throws a very strong blow and hits him in the torso. Because of such a strong blow, Gangram's rib broke and he was pushed back. He clenches his teeth hard, blood flies out of his mouth, and he thinks that he should kill him. He slides back because of this blow and thinks only that he wants to kill him. With a serious expression on his face, he wonders how someone like him is capable of this. The system notifies that the combat instinct skill has been improved to rank 2 ghostly fate. Sanity is temporarily restored. Gangram blocks Ti-hun's fist strike with his sword and continues to fly backwards. He smiles and says that he has finally come to his senses. Ti-hun is very surprised when he notices the strong fiery energy. He jumps back to a safe distance and asks loudly what he is going to do. Gangram, from whom fiery energy emanates, and he angrily says that he was considering options on how to deal with him. He swings his sword, and a surprised Ti-hun loudly asks how he can move if he broke his bones. Doesn't it really hurt him? Gangram runs after him, swings his sword, and says that even this kind of pain cannot stop him. Ti-hun runs away from him and asks loudly, "Has he gone completely crazy?" Gangram runs after him looking crazy and screaming loudly. Sometime after their battle, Ti-hun is lying on the ground and his face was injured due to the fire. He looks at Gangram, who stands in front of him with a raised sword in his hand, and says that he has won. He continues to look at Ti-hun with a crazy expression on his face, and the system notifies that the combat instinct skill has been cancelled due to lack of mana. The flame control skill was cancelled due to lack of mana. Smoke comes from Gangram's body due to the use of his skills, and he says that he will not kill him. He made the right decision. He puts his sword away, turns around and says that he should leave his snake alone and find another victim. Ti-hun stands up, points his finger at him and loudly says that this will not happen. He will return tomorrow, and if it doesn't work out, he will try again the day after tomorrow. Gangram turns to him and says with a serious expression that he shouldn't do this. Ti-hun loudly says that he can forget about it. He will defeat him in the end. After some time at the portal, the gods say these two will fight again tomorrow. He's excited about it. I agree, their drive is amazing, but only one of them will be able to complete their task. Jang Ti-hun can find another snake for himself. That's not true. He won't do that. Gangram passes through the portal, and he thinks that, exactly, Ti-hun is not one of those who easily gives up what he wants. But for one of them to lose, he cannot allow this. Dissatisfied students stand around Anavi and ask what is going on. Where is justice anyway? The third zone only needs to kill the snakes. Couldn't we just find another snake for the task? Anavi says that the purpose of the second zone is to protect the snakes, but they failed in this regard. She asks to understand this. They will be taken away as soon as the time for completing the task ends. Dissatisfied students disperse and ask why they can't just forget about it now. Are they really trying to get them out? Gangram, who is sitting on the bench, is thinking about the goal of the second zone. He gets some idea about it, after which he looks out from behind the wall and calls for Inspector Anavi. Gangram leans towards her and quietly asks her something. A small smile appears on her face. She agrees and says that it is possible. Gangram smiles and thinks this is wonderful. After some time in the dungeon, he walks through the forest and thinks that there is another reason why he cannot lose. He starts running and loudly tells Linny that he must come here, because it's time to hunt. The system notifies that the defense of the Great Serpent has been completed for 49 hours and 3 minutes. Gangrem met Tihun near the bridge, who was completely wet and had a bucket in his hand. The system notifies that the defense of the Great Serpent has been completed for 75 hours and 31 minutes. They both fight against each other. The system notifies that the defense of the Great Serpent has been completed for 100 hours and 1 minute. Tihun and Gangrem fight against each other again in this forest. The system notifies that the defense of the Great Serpent has been completed for 119 hours and 10 minutes. They fight on this day. The system notifies that the defense of the Great Serpent has been completed for 145 hours and 17 minutes. The defeated Tihun lies on the ground, doused with water. He gets up, and with a dissatisfied expression on his face asks, "What kind of injustice is this? Is it fair to fight by setting your body on fire?" Gangrem looks at him with a calm expression and says that he can afford to use this skill whenever he wants. Tihun asks, does he have to act like some kind of idiot? He runs away and says that they will see each other again. He must wait for him tomorrow. Gangrem says that he is not very different from him if he fights someone who can set his body on fire. The gods who are watching them ask, does it seem to him, or are they both crazy? He shouldn't say that, it's funny. Even the Great Serpent agrees with this. Gangrem turns to the snake that he tamed, and he said that it should stay underwater. Why did it come out? Maybe it's hungry. The Great Serpent waves his head at him in agreement. It swam to the shore of this lake and opened its mouth, and Gangrem pours out food and says that it should have a snack and return to its place. People are much more dangerous than any monsters. He leans over to the serpent, which is eating, and says that it should not tell Linny anything. After that, Gangrem gets up and says that it can go back. One of the gods writes that it seems that this was not enough for him. Jaol and Baum run to him, calling him master and asking what he is doing here. Gangrem says that he was simply feeding the Great Serpent. They say that she envies him because she also wants it that way. What's wrong with his face? They are angry that he was beaten and ask, is this the freak from the third zone? Why doesn't he find another snake? Gangrem, with a happy expression on his face, says that fighting him is quite fun. It's just extra training. Jael grabs him by the clothes and with a dissatisfied expression on his face asks if he is having fun. Who is he, OF fighter? Where is her master? He would never say something like that. They continue to talk to each other while the serpent floats away from them to the other shore. It surfaces and hears Tihun saying that he should disagree with his proposal. One of the 4 guys standing in front of him says that if he helps them, they can easily cope with the second zone. Even if they are stronger, they will be able to take them in numbers. Tihun says he doesn't care at all. He needs to deal with someone one-on-one. The guy with a wide smile says that he doesn't have to worry about it. There is some way to defeat Asio Gangrem. The serpent was surprised when she heard this and immediately dived under the water. Tihun heard the sound after that, turned around and looked at the lake with a thoughtful expression on her face. He turns to several guys and asks how can this be done? Some time later. Gangrem stands in front of the Great Serpent after the incident. He stands with a calm expression on his face and says that today is the last day. He raises his head and asks Tihun, who is walking behind him, what will he do if he loses again? Maybe he will finally find some other snake. Tihun says with a serious expression that he won't do anything as pathetic as this. If he loses, he will simply fail. Gangrem turns to him with a small smile and thinks that he knows it. He asks, is this really so? He takes out his sword and asks if they can bet on something, since this is their last fight. If he wins, he will fulfill one of his wishes. Tihun asks what will happen if he wins. Gangrem starts using his fire energy and says that he won't be able to. Tihun gets very angry about this and glares at him. He sighs and asks if he is really that confident in himself. They both take a fighting stance and he, raising his fist, says that his techniques will no longer work on him. After that, he begins to run towards him with his fists filled with energy. He strikes with a joyful expression and dispels the fiery energy. Gangram blocks the attack with his sword and wonders, is he going to walk right through this? The system notifies that the ability to determine fate is activated. A system window appears in front of him, in which it is written that this is Jang Tihun, Class Ghost Fate Secondary Rank. The attribute Earth, Blessing, is nicknamed number 1 among 10,000. Gangram looks at this and thinks that just like he thought, he got fire resistance. Tihun breaks his opponent's sword with one blow of his fist and asks what will he do now? Is that all he can do? A wide smile appears on his face, and he says that he said that in the end he would still defeat him. He is very surprised by the unexpected blow that Gangram dealt. He holds the 7-branch lightning sword in his hands, and Tihun, who jumped back, holds his wound on his leg and asks what is going on here. Gangram looks at him with a crazy expression on his face and smiles and says that victory will be his. Tihun looks at him with a worried expression and says that this freak has gone crazy again. He gets to his feet and says that apparently he has an ace up his sleeve or something like that. He channels strong energy into his hand and asks, but does he really think that he alone has a secret weapon? He creates a weapon from the energy in his hand and says that he was the one who started it. The system notifies you that the shapeless spear ability is activated. Sense organs warn of danger. Gangram was very surprised when he saw this notification. The gods who look at his spear laugh and ask, is this not Janba's snake spear? This is it. Perhaps he is gifted with the weapons of the deities. Tihun, with a very serious expression on his face, throws his spear with all his strength. Gangram puts his sword in front of him and blocks this spear. He is thrown back, and the system notifies that the combat instinct ability has been cancelled. He is very stressed about this attack and thinks that it should not be cancelled. The system notifies that the combat instinct skill is activated. Gangram was able to withstand this attack and loudly says that he must win no matter what. The system notifies you about this, that the ability of fighting instinct responded to his competitiveness and evolved to the ghostly fate of the primary rank. A sight of energy appeared in front of his eye, and he looked at his opponent. He sees the path to Tihun and wonders, what is this glow? He sees many such paths and wonders, is this a trajectory? Gangram sees what his opponent is targeting, and when he is about to attack, he begins to run very quickly towards him along the trajectory that appeared in front of him. He throws several very fast blows, and a surprised Tihun loudly asks how many hidden skills he has. Gangram, after these blows, stopped behind him while blood flowed from his wounds. He fell to the ground due to fatigue, and Tihun, who lost consciousness, immediately fell to the ground. One of the gods who looked at this asks if he really won again. The system notifies you about this, that the combat instinct skill has been cancelled. The gods write, how did he win? He managed to withstand even a spear. The other gods who look at this ask, how did he win? Did he manage to survive even after that spear? Maybe using a weapon he's not used to using isn't the best idea. But wouldn't that kill him? Gangram runs up to Tihun with a worried expression on his face, shaking him and wondering if he has gone too far. He says that he needs to be taken to Father Johann. Suddenly a bullet flies in front of his face, which greatly surprised him, and he wonders, is this an ambush? Several people run towards him, and one of them loudly says that they must grab him. He's probably already exhausted. Gangram looks at these few people and thinks that these are the guys from the third zone. He takes out a potion, which he immediately opens and thinks that he should give Tihun a healing potion first. Suddenly, he loses his balance and drops the potion he just took. He looks down and wonders, is this dirt? Gangram sees two people standing far away and wonders if this is some kind of earth-related spell. He uses fire magic and thinks that this is very bad. He needs to get out. While several guys are running towards him with weapons in their hands, one of the gods who looks at this asks, who is it? The system notifies that the fire control skill has been cancelled due to lack of mana. One of the gods asks if Gangram will really lose after everything that happened to him. Unexpectedly, one of the guys who was going to attack him is demolished by a great serpent that got out. This huge snake starts eating one of these guys, while the others look on with surprised expressions. Frightened guys loudly ask, "What's going on here? Why is this snake so huge? Is this even a snake? How else? Does he have any other options?" Because of what they said, the great serpent became very angry. Gangram, with a very worried expression on his face, asks them what they are even doing. This is actually a great serpent. He wonders if they really didn't look at the manual. He asked him to stay underwater because he was afraid that this might happen. Some time ago. He says with a happy expression that he will remove this bandage in a week. So it should try to keep a low profile and live a normal life, okay? He remembers the fourth rule that was in the manual and thinks that this cannot be called a snake. The guy with the sword runs and loudly says that this is probably his snake. They need to kill it. Gangram, with a worried expression on his face, loudly says that they should run away from here. The serpent begins to scream very loudly out of rage, while the guy loudly says that this snake must die. He stops when he notices that something strange is happening to the serpent, and says that they should wait. There is something wrong with this snake. Gangram looks at what is happening with a very surprised expression on his face and thinks that this is because the great serpent, who is called a snake, cannot become a dragon. Because of this, he is overcome with rage and indignation, after which he becomes a Gangchuori monster. Immediately after the transformation, it attacks these guys, who run away. The system notifies that Gangchuori protection has been completed for 155 hours and 1 minute. Gangram, after getting out of the trap, helps lift Tihun and looks at what is happening. He looks at the monster in front of him and thinks that maybe he would have a chance if the Gangchuori recognized him. At this moment, a huge monster releases very strong flames from its mouth at the guys. Gangram watches this and thinks that this is unlikely to happen. The gods who are watching what is happening ask, "Haven't these idiots read the manual?" He had never seen this before. The system notifies that Gangchuori has a class of the highest dragon rank, a great serpent who fell because he could not become a dragon. It has poison and is capable of releasing fire. His body is like steel. A huge Gangchuori releases a very strong stream of flame high into the air, and this is noticed by the students who protect their snakes. And one of the gods says that they made a huge mistake. Jeongmin takes out a loudspeaker from his inventory and loudly says that they should pay attention. This is the Destiny Protection Agency. A dragon-type monster, Gangchuori, appeared. Forest fires occur in the places where the monster was located. The guys towards whom this monster is approaching run away and shout loudly that it is approaching. Sangwon, who is not running fast enough, loudly says that he must wait, because he is intolerant to poisons. Jeongmin loudly says that he is calling on everyone to evacuate to the sacred tree for their own safety. Sua uses his magic to protect Sangwon and the guy who helps him. She built a tunnel of trees and loudly says that they should run to the sacred tree as quickly as possible. Gangram runs away with Tihun on his back and thinks that the agency will probably intervene. Jeongmin wants to say something to the interns, but stops when he notices the system windows appearing in front of him. He says they should forget about it. A new mission is proposed from the Destiny Protection Agency. Killing a Gangchuori will count as completing the quest, and they will receive additional rewards. Gajun stops, looks up with a big smile and asks, "He heard that too, right?" Johan, who is standing next to him, looks in the same direction and wants to say something, but stops. Gajun looks at the Gangchuori who is not far from him and says loudly that it looks like it's time for a boss raid. Some time later, Gangram reaches the sacred tree and thinks that everyone has already gathered here. He runs to the rest of the people and asks, "Is Father Johan here?" He notices this, raises his hand, loudly agrees and says that he is here. Gangram carefully puts Tihun on the ground and politely asks him to help him. Johan, who is concerned about his condition, loudly asks what happened to him. He is very surprised when he heard from Gangram that this was his work. Suwa runs towards him with a worried expression on his face, calling his name loudly and asking if he is okay. Why is there blood on his back? Gangram turns to her and calls her name. He points to Tihan and says that he's fine, but he's not so good. Suwa asks if this is the guy from the third zone who came every day to fight him. She is unaware of what happened and says that everything seems to be fine with his serpent. What does he think about the task of killing Gangchiori? Gangram rises to his feet, looks towards this huge monster, and says that it seems that first he needs to reconnoiter the situation. This Gangchiori is the very serpent he defended. What he just did surprised Suwa very much. She looks at the huge monster, remembers what happened before and asks loudly, "Is this the same creature?" She says with a serious expression that then he can't kill it. Gangram looks at Gangchiori, agrees and says that she is right, but he also cannot close his eyes to what is happening. Tihan, who was being treated, stands up and loudly says that this is not so. Surprised by this, Gangram turns around and asks if he has woken up yet. Tihan looks at him with a serious expression and says that he can't kill it. Gangram looks at him with a blank expression and says that he himself wanted to kill it. Tihan says he doesn't understand. This is different. Gangram wonders if he says this because he values loyalty. He agrees and says that therefore he will have to find a solution. Jiangmin approaches them and says that nothing will come of this. The fallen great serpent must be killed. The heat and poison that emanate from his body are capable of destroying the demon realm. Normally, the security agency would take up this matter, but he does not know the thoughts of his superiors. A loser who couldn't become a dragon is really a huge problem. Tihan was very embarrassed when he heard him call it a loser. He lowers his head and thinks about it. Gangram says that in any case, this needs to be stopped. Jiangmin says that, however, he can't handle this alone. Gangram turns around and says that it looks like he will have to take care of Gangchiori. Can he count on them? Suwa, Bam and Jaol, who just approached her, say that of course he can rely on them. They are a team after all. Tihan looks at them with a surprised expression and wonders, did she say command? Then, what about the great serpent? Does he mean nothing to her? He stands up very sharply, asks them to stop and asks loudly, do they want to kill this? He looks at them with a worried expression on his face and says that this is a great serpent. He clenches his teeth very hard out of anger and says loudly that he shouldn't do this. After this, he immediately runs away from them, and Gangram tries to stop him by calling his name. He looks at him with a sad expression and lowers his hand. Some time later, Tihan sits with a very angry expression on his face and remembers Jiangmin, who said that a loser who couldn't become a dragon is really a huge problem. He sits on a sacred tree and ponders what happened. He closes his eyes and remembers how someone called him a loser. His father slaps him in the face and asks loudly, is he trying to disgrace his name? He is ashamed to have a son like him. Tihan, who remembers this, thinks that he lived for 20 years, doing everything he told him. But it never seemed to be enough for him. His father asks why is this all he can do? They said he was destined to become a great man. Tihan thinks that the problem is not that he couldn't achieve anything. He simply couldn't be the perfect son his parents wanted. Because for them, what is not ideal is a complete failure. He couldn't help but think that he would never stop being a loser. This led to him getting into fights and not being able to control himself. Everyone around him seemed to be his enemies. Maybe that's why he became so attached to the great serpent. Tihan sits on a branch of a sacred tree, looks away and says that he thought Gangram was different from the others. Some time ago as he carried him to safety, Tihan, who has regained consciousness, asks why he is helping him. Did he deserve this? It was he who set the guys from the third zone on him. Gangram says he doesn't think he would do such a thing. He surprised Tihan by saying that he wasn't that kind of guy. He knows what kind of person he is and trusts him. Tihan was touched by these words and thinks that when he heard this, he felt as if a stone had been lifted from his soul. And he also understands perfectly well that they cannot allow the great serpent to destroy the demon kingdom. but, if possible, it would be great to save Gangchiori the way he protected him. He looks at Gangram, who at this time points his finger at the key that Gongju gave him. Bom and Jaol, who look at him, ask, can he borrow a weapon? Will they be able to kill Gangchiori? Gangram says that he would like to clarify something. In fact, he would like to take care of Gangchiori. He smiles as he squeezes the key in his hand and says that he would like to do this without killing the Gangchiori. Some time later, he says that's his plan. Sua thinks about it and says that it seems like they should try. Bom asks if they should ask others not to kill Gangchiori. Gangram looks at her with a blank expression and asks, who would try to do this? They will simply complete the mission in a day and calm down. Jaol asks, what about that idiot? Everyone else immediately understood who she meant and thought about Gajun. Jaol turns and asks, how did you react when you heard the announcement? Johan, who was with him at the time, remembers this and says that he was really excited by the news of the raid. Immediately after that, they started looking for him and Gangram asks where he is now. At the same time, Gajun with a blank expression and a smile asks where are they going? Sangwon, who is angry about what is happening and says that they are running to the lobby. Is he seriously going to fight this monster? Gajun asks, are they running away? Sangwon approaches him and says that they will finish the task if they just hold out for one day. Why would they even risk it? He passes by him and says that he will go to safety with his snake, and he can fight with anyone. Gajun grabs his snake and asks if it's true. He releases dark energy and asks what will he do now. The system notifies that the decomposition skill is activated. Gajun opens his hand and says that it looks like his snake is dead. Concerned and surprised by what happened, Sangwon turns around and loudly calls out to his snake. Snake Gajun is shaking violently out of fear after what happened, while he dusts off his hands and says that he shouldn't say anything stupid. He turns to the rest of the people who were next to him and says that this applies to them too. People were very scared because of this and looked at him with worried faces. Gajun runs between them very quickly and kills the snakes of these people while they scream loudly because they are worried about their snakes and ask why he is doing this. He killed all the snakes with his ability and left their bodies lying on the ground. The guy, dissatisfied with what happened, points at him and loudly says that this is not fair. He kills other snakes, but does not touch his own. Immediately after, Gajun grabbed his snake and activated his skill and says that he will do it if he cares so much. The system notifies that he was unable to protect the snake. Concerned about what happened, people look in surprise at the body of the snake, which fell to the ground. Gajun throws the remains of the snake on the ground and asks if he is better now. He directs his hand at people with his energy and says that now he is obliged to kill the Gangchiori. They have to do it all together. Some time later, Gajun walks along with a crowd of people and says that they will now go fight Gangchiori. Gangram looks at him and says that he was just looking for him. He sees a lot of very sad people standing behind him and asks why there are so many people with him. Gajun says with a joyful smile that this is an army to help the protagonist. He comes up to him with the same joyful smile and asks, he already has a plan, right? Concerned people behind him gesture that he is crazy and quietly say that he should say yes. They can't let this psycho lead them. Gangram agrees and says that he may need his help. He has an idea on how to deal with it. Sometime later, several people exit through the portal, and one of them says that he doesn't even know what the director is thinking about. The students may simply die because of this. Gongju, with a serious expression on his face, says that this is why they are taking backup. Yongmu also exits through the portal and smiles and tells the manager that he is late. Gongju gets angry at her appearance and asks what she is even doing here. This isn't even her zone. He turns around and tells manager Yang that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The man he told yawns and agrees with him. At the same time, someone fires a very powerful shot and wounds the Gangchiori, after which it begins to scream loudly in pain. Gongju turns and asks who is fighting this monster. Yang Liebig looks at the system window that appeared in front of him and says that this is his student, Seo Gangram, as well as everyone from the second zone. Gongju looks at the system window and asks, "Is that really him?" Liebig waves the talisman and says that they won't make it anyway. Maybe they could just help them and come back. Young Yu turns to them and says that they should wait for now. The director ordered them not to rush. She turns to the Gangchiori and says that, however, she hopes that they will surrender soon. She hums a tune and says that if Gangram loses, she will transfer him to the first zone. Gongju gets angry about this and asks why is she here. Yang Yu says that she really wants to know where such a powerful awakened one came from. She's so jealous. One of the managers gets very angry about what is happening and bites his lip. At the same time, Bomb fires a rifle shot and hits the Gangchiori in the head. The system notifies that this weapon is a ghost killer. Large caliber sniper rifle. Great for hunting thick-skinned monsters. Taken from the Gongju arsenal. Gangchiori pays attention to her, looks at them and concentrates energy in his mouth. It releases a strong stream of fire, and Johan uses the protective barrier skill and protects her. Someone shoots from the other side and slightly hits the Gangchiori. Jaol, who shoots from a new bow and says that it should look here. The system notifies you about this, that this is a bloody onion. The bow of the hero who struck the 9 moons. Taken from the Gongju arsenal. Gangchiori releases a stream of energy at her, but Linny uses her water control skill and protects her. Gongju looks at this with a blank expression and wonders what they are doing. They just miss with their attacks. But in defense they are very good. Such weapons are not for beginners like them. They won't be able to handle it at this rate. Gangchiori concentrates its fiery energy in its mouth, but this fire immediately disappears. Many people with melee weapons run towards this monster and loudly say that Gangchiori has run out of flame. Everyone must run to the attack. The monster releases strong poison and fire from its body. People block this with shields and loudly say that this heat and poison is already having a bad effect. Warriors with high resistance to flame and poison should go to the front line. Are they sure they can handle this? Maybe we should push this monster against the wall. One of these people activates the skill to summon an ice wall. Someone loudly says that they must push to the control point. Gangchiori breaks out of this ice and worried people say it's too hard. Sua uses her magic, loudly calls people with water abilities, and says that she will limit the Gangchiori's mobility, and they must extinguish the flames. Everyone acts according to her plan, and the system notifies that the tree leaf method skill and water bomb are activated. Sua says loudly that they must continue and stop the fire from spreading. Several people with shields run towards the Gangchiori and say that they should work harder. The system notifies that the monster's strength and physical support skills are activated. They continue to push the Gangchiori to the edge and loudly say that they are almost there, just a little longer. It begins to scream very loudly out of anger, and the ground under its paws begins to collapse. The guys who are standing next to Gangchiori turn around and say loudly that there is no room to push. What should they do now? Gangram said they should push it off the cliff. Gajun concentrates energy around himself and says that they should stand behind him. He sends energy into the ground in front of him and activates the decomposition skill, after which the Gangchiori falls off the cliff. A bird with a glowing eye at that moment flies over this monster lying on the ground. Liebig looks at the system window, which broadcasts video from the eyes of this bird. He sees Gangram, who climbs onto the Gangchiori's head and says that this is where he has been all this time. At this time he climbs onto the monster's head, and because of the temperature he gets burned. He looks for something with a worried expression on his face and says that he needs a sunken area in the middle of his head. He thrusts his sword into the area with a smile and says he found it. Gongju, with a joyful expression on his face, loudly says that he knew that they would succeed. Yang Yu thinks it's bad with a worried expression. She bites her fingernail and thinks that her plan was to lure Gangram to her side when he fails the mission. Ever since she lost valuable students from the first zone, she needs guys from other zones. If Gangchiori loses, then everything will be in vain. Can they do anything to make them lose? Gongju looks at the system window with a blank expression and asks what he is doing now. He watches as Gangram plunges his sword into the sunken area on the Gangchiori's head. Some time ago, he says it looks like they should definitely give it a try. The problem is that the monster is going crazy and has already forgotten his face. Gajun says with a big smile that he has an idea. You need to pierce his Bai Hui point. Then it will be able to recognize him. After he has done this, Gangchiori raises his head and screams very loudly. Gangram is worried about what is happening and loudly says that everything is fine and it should calm down. It's him. Gangchiori looks at him with wild eyes. It calmed down and lowered its head. Gangram asks if it recognizes him now. He wraps the cloth around his head and asks if it remembers this. He will now tie the token of affection again. Gongju looks at this through the system window and asks, is he taming this monster to make it easier to kill? This is impressive. Libik says he is as cruel as he comes. Yongniu is silent for a few seconds and thinks and says that he should write this down in the report. She says her name and says that she is the leader of the first team. They must deal with Gangchiori themselves, and indicate in the report that the students did not have a chance to cope. Gongju turns around with a dissatisfied expression and asks what is she saying. This area is run by him and Libik. Only they have the right to decide. Yongniu sends electric energy into his hand with a smile and says that she didn't hear that from the director. It seems to her that Gangram is in danger. She creates a very strong lightning, which she directs at the Gangchiori and loudly asks, do they need eyes for beauty? This lightning hits the sword, which is stuck in the head of the monster next to Gangram, and this is seen by the managers through the system window. Gongju grabs Yongniu by her clothes and asks if she is even sane. She struck lightning next to the student. She asks with a blank expression on her face, did she hit the head? She was aiming for the leg. Besides, Gangram was not injured. Gongju asks loudly, is she joking now? Yongniu says it was a mistake. She runs away and thinks that if Gangram dies, it will be bad. She needs to be closer. Gongju, with a worried expression on his face, loudly asks what is she up to. Yongniu jumps off a cliff, turns around and says he's in danger, and she goes to save him. She activates the aerial walking skill and activates the lightning skill, which attacks Gangchiori. She looks down with a happy expression on her face and thinks it's a clear shot this time. Gongju flies after her with Libik in his hands and says loudly that if something happens to him, he won't just leave it like that. Yongniu ignores him and asks why her punch didn't go through. Gangram calmly sits on the head of Gangchiori and the system notifies about it, that it could not resist the sign of affection. It submits to him again. Gangram holds his hand up and wonders, are these messengers interfering again? Yongniu lands on a small rock, notices a sword that is filled with lightning, and says that it looks like the weapon in his hands attracts lightning. Gangram notices 3 executives coming down to him and asks if this is the Gongju executive. He notices Yongniu and remembers that she is the woman from the video. She goes to him with a sword in her hands, apologizes to him and says that she tried to help, but only made it worse. She is glad that the lightning did not hit him. Gangchiori's internal wounds are very serious. She returns this sword to him. Now he must let her. Gangram says no one will touch Gangchiori. Yongniu asks what does this mean. He throws up his hands and says that he didn't want to kill it in the first place. Moreover, he will not allow them to do this. He raises his voice greatly and says that this is his dragon. Gangchiori calmly watches him defend him. Yongniu says that this is not a dragon. Gongju interrupts her, calls Gangram and says that it is a monster anyway. The poison and the flames that it spews are nothing more than an attempt to subjugate everything. Gangram says he doesn't care, he still won't do it. Gongju gets angry about this and says he is an idiot. Gangram raises his hand with fiery energy and says that however, he will take care of him. He puts his hand to the head of the sad Gangchuori. With a calm expression on his face, he calls Linny and says that now it's his turn. The Killen flies up to him and immediately concentrates energy above his head. This ball of energy hits the head of the Gangchuori, who is lying on the ground. The entire body of this huge monster begins to radiate very strong and bright energy. This energy glows so brightly that it makes leaders and other people cover their eyes with their hand. Tihun walks towards them and also covers his face with his hand. He watches from the side, and Gangram pats Gangchuori on the head and says that he is not a mistake or a monster. Tihun looks at what is happening and is very surprised by what is happening. Gangram says with a calm expression that he is a real dragon. The system notifies that the cleansing of Gangchuori from regrets has begun. After this, Gangchuori became much smaller and with a joyful expression on his face lays down in Gangram's arms with tears in his eyes. He goes to the managers and says that he is fine now. Gongju and Yangniu were very surprised by this and asked what it was. It turns out that Killen can do this too. Liebig strokes the Gangchuori's horn and says with a smile that it's definitely a dragon. The system notifies that they have defeated the Gangchuori monster. People look at the system windows that appeared in front of them and happily say that it says here that the mission is completed. She's like that too. And it's exactly the same with him. Some of them are happy about the completed task, while others are happy about what just happened. Gangram asks the messenger if he can take the dragon with him. He is still experiencing side effects. Gongju says he can do as he wants. First of all, he must take care of himself. Gangram thanked him for this, and Yangniu says that when she looks at him, there's not a living thing visible on him. He might die if they leave him. Gongju gets very angry about this and asks what is she even saying. Yangniu turns around and says that he must heal him. Why is he standing still? A man in a mask comes to them and says that she is right. She turns around and asks, "These are very expensive drugs. Does he know about that?" She saved it just in case. The man smeared Gangram ointment on his face and hands and says that everything is ready. Yangniu tells the masked man that of course she told him to do everything to make him like her, but if he will. Gangram ignores them and turns around. He looks at Tihun, who walks towards him and asks if it is his turn to fight him now. He is silent for several seconds and looks at Gangram, who is holding the monster in his hands. He waves his hand in refusal and says that he is a dragon, not a snake. They make eye contact, and Gangram says that he doesn't think there are any snakes left here. The dragon waves his hand, and a worried Tihun raises his hands and says that he doesn't need it. He says with a kind smile that he already said that he lost, so he finished. Gangram holds the dragon with one hand, puts the sword in his inventory with the other, and says that if this is so, then he must obey his orders. Tihun sighs, agrees, and asks, "What is this?" Gangram motions for him to follow him and says that they should talk somewhere else. The dragon continues to be angry about what happened, and he says that there is nothing wrong with it. After that, he leaves, and a worried Tihun calls his name and says that it doesn't look like anything. They can just talk here. Some time after they went to a deserted place and talked. Tihun was surprised by what he heard and asked, "Is this really possible?" Gangram nods his head in agreement. He throws up his hands and says that if he doesn't want to. He doesn't have time to finish because Tihun extends his hand to him and says that he will do as he said. He smiles broadly and says that he wants to work with him. The system notifies that their destinies are intertwined. CO Gangram's fortunes are leveling out. His fate class is upgraded to human secondary rank. Some time later, Gangram wonders what it is. Could this be sleep paralysis again? He lies on the bed, clenches his teeth very hard, and thinks that this is very painful. It seemed to him that he was already accustomed to paralysis and nightmares. He begins to move his limbs and thinks that he can move. It seems like he can do it. He notices Linny, who stands on him and makes a sound. He presses hard on Gangram's chest and makes sounds. He picks it up and is about to say something. Linny creates magical energy in front of her head and activates the cleansing skill. He channels energy into Gangram's head, and he asks why he uses it on him. He notices a ray of light that falls on his face and is surprised because of this. He gets up and with a surprised expression on his face asks, "Is it really evening already? Already the next day?" Lenny lifts his t-shirt, and there were visible severe wounds from the incident. Gangram is surprised by this and asks what he is doing. He understood everything and says that he is purifying the remnants of the poison. He pats Lenny on the head and thanks him for what he did. After that, Gangram gets out of bed, hears a sound from under the bed, and says that apparently he was very tired since he slept all day. It took too long. Immediately after this, he looks under the bed and looks at something with a surprised expression on his face. He sees a red and black dragon, tertiary rank ghost fate class. A dragon with the energy of poison, fire and water. More aggressive than other dragons. Has an attack stronger than other dragons. Gangram remembers the past and thinks that he sent him back to the spirit realm because he really wanted to take a bite of Tihun. Maybe he called him in a dream. He raises the dragon and says that he must behave. He wonders what to call it, David or maybe Lucky. The dragon, with a dissatisfied expression on his face, begins to growl his stomach due to hunger. He decided to name him Yorn because of the sound he made and says that first they need to feed him. And Lenny too. Some time later in the dining room, Gangram sits eating with them and thinks that now he has to pay twice as much for food. Gajun comes to him, calls him by name and says that this is where he was. So, what is he like, this dragon? What is his name? Yorn looks at him with an angry expression and Gangram calls his name. Gajun removes the hand that the dragon wanted to bite and asks in surprise, "Isn't that the name for the snake?" Gangram says it's for the dragon, if he calls it that. Gajun looks at the animals on the table for a few seconds. He asks, "If you think like that, there is something more in him, doesn't he think so?" Gangram paid attention to him and said nothing. He thinks he's right. It's not just the dragon Yorn that he brought here, some time ago after the dragon transformation. Tihun asks what are the orders. Gangram points his finger at him and says with a smile that he is going to the second zone. He thinks there's a reason why Anavi settled into the second zone where the students missed all the snakes. They all failed the mission of the second zone. Even after failure, you can get a second chance if you move to another zone. In this case, you need to start over, but it will be difficult. Yorn notices his plate is empty because Lenny ate his food, and Gajun asks why he did it. Gangram sighs with his eyes closed and says that he looks useful. Gajun says there are others like him in other zones. Gangram gets angry at him and asks maybe because he is reasonable, unlike some. Gajun's eyes sparkle, and he asks with a happy expression, "Will he become someone cool in the future?" Gangram was embarrassed by this and asks if he still thinks that he is a regressor. Gajun agrees, remembers what happened earlier and says that in the Viper's room he looked like the main character. So he decided to reflect a little. Gangram asks what he was reflecting on. Gajun says that he seems to be missing something. Gangram remembers everything that happens to him and wonders what he's missing. He has done more than his fair share of insanity. He says that he helped a lot with Gangchiori. Gajun's body shakes violently because of something, refuses and says that he meant that help would help him. He clenches his fist very tightly and is about to say something about who this makes him. He doesn't finish speaking because Sua opens the door to the dining room. They both look at each other for a few seconds. Gajun was embarrassed when he noticed her and said that he would probably go. He's already taken too long a break, so it's time for him to get back to work. He leaves and Gangram watches him leave and says that it looks like he's in the midst of writing his story. Sua walks past him, waves and asks if he's okay. Gangram wonders if Gajun is avoiding her. He agrees and says he's fine. How does she feel? Sua says she's fine, though. She asks, he didn't do something strange again. Many people failed the task because of him. The atmosphere is quite tense. Many people are afraid of Tihun because he is from another zone. Gangram says that she doesn't have to worry about him because he's not a bad person. Tihan passed by Gajun and watches him walk on and hum a melody. He waves his hand, calls him an old man and asks if they are talking about him now. Gangram looks at him and says that he should introduce himself. This is Shin Sua. She stands up, says her name, says hello and says that she is Gangram's partner. Tihan sits down at their table, greets them, says his name and says that he is from the 3rd zone, glad to meet you. Gangram holds back the evil Yorn and looks at them blankly as they remain silent for a few seconds. Sua says she wishes them bon appetit and they will see each other later. Gangram looks at her and agrees with her. He watches her leave and thinks that he was hoping they would talk longer. Tihan leans towards him and quietly asks if she is his girlfriend. Gangram says that's not true, and he seriously called him an old man. Tihan agrees with a joyful expression on his face and says that he is older. Gangram says that he has already called him every possible name. Tihan looks away and says that he doesn't want to break his tongue about his name. To be honest, it seemed to him that they had known each other for a very long time. Gangram asks if he really thinks so. Tihan remembers the past and thinks that he looks like the guy he had a fight with not too long ago, and he seemed glad to see him. It was the same with Sua. He had a premonition that in the future he would definitely work with her. This is something like déjà vu. Does he understand? As if he had already seen them somewhere. Gangram was very embarrassed by what he just said. He asks that this is something like fate. Tihan thinks about this and says that these sayings look stupid. In general, he thinks they will make good partners, no matter what. Gangram clenches his fists tightly and wonders, is it a coincidence that he has these thoughts? Or does he direct the future in the right direction? Tihan looks away and says that he thought he was a lone wolf, but apparently he has a lot of friends. He would like to become closer not only with Sua, but also with others. He turns to him and with a serious expression on his face says that he would like to make friends with everyone except that freak. Gangram asks who is he talking about? Is he talking about Gajun? Tihan says that it was he, this freak who killed all the snakes. He can't stand people like him. He gets very angry and asks how can you kill the snake that he swore to protect? Gangram says that he thought things weren't so bad for them. Tihan says that he would never date a freak like him. Gangram says that he should try not to provoke him, otherwise you never know what will happen. He thinks that he seems to get along with Sua and Father Johann. Plus, he's about the same age as Bam and Jaol, so everything should go well. Tihan says he has something else. He beckons him with his finger and says that he has some proposal. Some time later, Tihan knocks down the door with both legs, and someone shoots and hits the door. One of the people who passes by looks into the doorway and hears loud sounds. Tihan goes into a large hole in the wall and wipes his face. He asks if she can tell me why she decided to attack him. Bam points her weapon at him and says that she cannot accept him. Tihan gets angry about this and asks who she even is. Gangram brought him here. Bam asks if he is wondering who she is. She is the master's first student. Besides, her guardian angel doesn't like him at all. He believes that he has no shame or conscience. Besides this, he is also trying to take Gangram away from them. She heard perfectly well